The air in the ministry's restricted archives was thick with the scent of old parchment and cold stone, a silence so deep it hummed in the ears. Luna Lovegood stood motionless before a bookshelf that had not existed yesterday. It was slender, carved from pale ash wood banded with silver inlays that shimmered like trapped moonlight. The spines of its books were blank, yet pulsed faintly, as if breathing. She tilted her head, one hand hovering just above the nearest volume, feeling the soft thrum of magic beneath her fingertips, warm, alive, and oddly familiar. "It wasn't here," she murmured. "I counted every shelf this morning." Behind her the heavy oak door creaked open, and polished shoes clicked against the floor. Draco Malfoy stepped in, his grey coat draped over one arm, his expression caught between irritation and reluctant curiosity. He paused, eyes narrowing as he took in the new shelf. "That's new," he said, voice cool, but edged with something sharper. Recognition, perhaps. Luna turned, her wide eyes catching the dim light. "You can see it too?" "Unless I've finally gone mad," he replied, approaching slowly. "Which, given the week I've had, wouldn't be entirely surprising." She smiled faintly. "Only the ones touched by ancient magic can see it, or those who are meant to." He scoffed, but didn't argue. Instead, he reached into his coat and withdrew a thin wand of blackthorn, its tip glowing faintly blue, as he swept it in an arc. The air rippled. "This isn't ministry enchantment. It's older than the building itself." "The spellbook is rewriting history," Luna said softly, "and it's starting here." A silence settled, broken only by the whisper of pages turning, though none of the books appeared to move. Then slowly the center volume slid forward on its own, hovering in midair. Its cover, smooth and dark as obsidian, bore a single symbol, an owl with wings outstretched formed from interlocking runes. Draco took an involuntary step back. "Ravenclaw." Luna reached for it. "Don't," he snapped. "You don't know what it'll do." "I think it knows me," she said, fingers brushing the cover. The moment she touched it, the room shuddered. The walls trembled. Shelves groaned and began to shift, sliding apart like tectonic plates, revealing narrow corridors where none had been. The ceiling cracked open in places, revealing not stone but a swirling aurora of stars and silver mist, some long-forgotten enchantment reawakening. Draco grabbed her arm. "We need to go, now." But Luna didn't move. Her eyes were closed, her breath slow. He sung, and then they heard it. A voice, soft as wind through reeds, speaking in a language that wasn't quite Latin, wasn't quite anything earthly. It came from the book, from the walls, from the very floor beneath their feet. In Star, only the seeker with moon in her gaze, and the heir with shadow in his blood, may tread the path of forgotten halls. Star Draco let go of her arm as if burned. "That's not possible. That's founder-level warding. No one's heard those words in 1,000 years." "They've been waiting," Luna said, opening her eyes. "For us." The book snapped open. Pages fluttered, not with wind, but with purpose. Words emerged, ink bleeding into existence, then vanishing, rewriting themselves in real time. A map began to form. Towers, corridors, stairwells spiraling into impossible geometries. At its center, a pulsing glyph, the Ravenclaw diadem, but altered, cracked down the middle. "This isn't just a library anymore," Luna whispered. "It's alive, and it's showing us the way." Draco stared at the shifting lines, his jaw tight. "You realize if we walk into one of those corridors, we might not come back the same, if we come back at all." She looked at him, her gaze steady. "Then it's a good thing we're both used to being changed, isn't it?" He exhaled sharply, almost a laugh. "You're mad." "Possibly," she said, stepping toward the newly formed passage. "But I'm also right." And as the shelves continued to move, sealing off the world they knew, Draco followed, because the magic demanded it, and because, against all reason, he trusted her more than he trusted the silence. Dust motes swam in the slanted afternoon light that pierced through the high arched windows of the restricted section's forgotten annex. The air smelled of parchment steeped in time, of ink that had forgotten its color, and something else, something faintly metallic, like the breath before lightning. Luna Lovegood knelt on the worn stone floor, her fingers tracing the spine of a book that should not have been there. It wasn't listed in any catalogue. It hadn't answered to summoning charms. And yet, when she'd whispered Rowena's name into the silence of the library the night before, the book had answered, not in words, but in a soft hum that vibrated in her molars. The binding was made of leather etched with constellations that shifted when viewed from the corner of the eye. Polaris blinked slowly. Orion's belt pulsed like a heartbeat. Luna ran her palm over the cover, and the stars flared, casting tiny pinpricks of light onto the walls. A seal, cracked but still intact, bore the image of an open eye within a crescent moon, Ravenclaw's sigil. Beneath it, a single line of script curled like smoke. Star, she who listens, may yet be heard. Star Luna exhaled. I'm listening. The book opened on its own. Pages turned backward, not forward, unwriting themselves, peeling away ink that dissolved into silver mist before reforming into new glyphs, new diagrams, new languages. No living person had spoken since the fall of the Western enchanters. A column of text resolved into something almost legible, Gaelic with a twist of celestial syntax. She leaned closer. The words shimmered, then rearranged into English, but not quite. The grammar was dream logic, the verbs breathing. Star, the mind is not a vessel, but a sky. To fill it is to cloud it. Star, Luna, smiled. Hello, Rowena. Then she saw it. On the inside of the front cover, written not in ink, but in what looked like powdered moonstone, was a name. Not Rowena's, hers. Star, Luna, star, not just written. Star breathing, star. The letters pulsed in sequence, glowing faintly with each syllable. Luna. Luna. As if the book were testing the shape of her name on some unseen tongue. Her breath caught. She reached out, hesitated, then brushed a fingertip against the letters. A sound like wind through high towers filled the room. The book trembled. Dust rose in spirals, caught in an invisible current. For a moment, the shadows along the shelves deepened, and in them shapes stirred, figures with long robes and eyes like polished quartz. One raised a hand, not in warning, but in recognition. Then it was gone. Luna sat back on her heels, heart steady but humming. You knew I'd come, she murmured, didn't you? The book didn't answer. But the name on the page shifted, just slightly. The dot appeared above the second ah, turning it into a rue, meaning star return. Star, then beneath it, new ink bloomed in a looping hand that was not her own. Star, the first key is not found in locks, but in listening. Find the echo beneath the silence. The tower remembers. Star Luna closed her eyes. The air tasted different now, charged, expectant. Somewhere deep in the castle a stone shifted. A stairway realigned. The castle was awake. She reached for her satchel, carefully lifting the book. It felt warmer now, almost alive against her skin. As she stood, a whisper threaded through the shelves, not in any language, but in tone. A woman's voice, distant, singing a lullaby in a minor key. Luna paused. I'll find the echo, she said softly, but you'll have to keep singing. The air in the ministry's restricted archive hummed with the quiet energy of forgotten spells, a low thrum that settled beneath the skin like the echo of distant thunder. Rows of ancient tomes stood sentinel behind glass, their spines etched with runes that flickered when unobserved. In the center of the dimly lit chamber, resting on a pedestal of black basalt, lay the book. It was unassuming in shape, a leather-bound volume, its cover worn smooth by time, the silver-blue insignia of an eagle, barely visible beneath centuries of grime. But the moment Luna Lovegood stepped closer, the air thickened, and the candle flames bent toward it like supplicants. It's breathing, she murmured, tilting her head. Her fingers hovered just above the cover, not quite touching. Can you feel it, Draco, like a heartbeat in the silence? Draco Malfoy stood a few paces behind, arms crossed, robes pulled tight against the sudden chill. His breath curled in faint wisps before him, though the archive wasn't cold. It's a book, Lovegood. Books don't breathe. This one does. She opened it. The pages shifted, not turned. Star shifted star. As if rearranging themselves in a language only the book understood. Ink, silver and luminous, spread across the parchment like liquid stars, forming and dissolving symbols before solidifying into new incantations. A soft chime rang out, high and clear, and then the first enchantment slipped free. A ripple passed through the air. The glass case beside them shattered, not with a crash, but a sigh, and the scrolls within floated upward, unrolling themselves mid-air. Words peeled from the parchment, glowing emerald, and wove through the room like fireflies. One brushed Draco's arm. He flinched. "It touched me." "They're curious," Luna said, watching the drifting words with a small smile, "like moths drawn to light. This is not curiosity. This is chaos." His voice was clipped, but his gray eyes darted, tracking the glowing fragments. "That one's in Parseltongue. Why is there Parseltongue in Rowena Ravenclaw's spellbook?" Luna didn't answer immediately. She reached out, and a strand of light curled around her finger like a cat. Maybe she was listening to voices others couldn't hear. Snakes whisper secrets, you know, especially the old ones. A low groan echoed through the archive. The pedestal cracked, lines branching outward like frost. The book trembled. Draco stepped forward, wand drawn. "Close it." In a moment, Luna's voice remained calm, almost dreamy, but her fingers moved swiftly, tracing a countercharm in the air, a spiral of soft blue light. "It's testing us. The magic wants to know if we understand it, and if we don't, then it writes over us." She finally snapped the book shut. The effect was instantaneous. The floating words winked out. The scrolls dropped. The hum in the air stilled, then reversed, pulling backward, as if the room itself were inhaling. Draco staggered, gripping the edge of a shelf. His vision blurred. For a heartbeat he saw double, the archive as it was, and another version, older, wilder, with ivy growing through the stone, and owls perched on the rafters, watching with human eyes. Then it passed. He exhaled sharply. What in Merlin's name was that? "A memory," Luna said, cradling the book carefully. "Or a possibility. The spellbook isn't just recording magic, it's remembering worlds that could have been, and it's starting to bleed them through." Draco stared at her. "You're telling me that book showed me an alternate reality, only a glimpse?" She looked down at the closed cover. The eagle insignia pulsed once faintly. "But if we don't find the original incantation, the one that anchored it, then the bleed won't stop. Spells will rewrite themselves. People might forget whom they are, or remember lives they never lived." He let out a slow breath. "So we don't just have to find how it works. We have to find how it started. Star, Luna nodded. "And someone long ago must have known how to stop it, or contain it, or love it enough not to." She met his eyes. "We'll need to go deeper, to places even the Ministry doesn't remember." Draco looked at the book, then at her wild hair, her wide unflinching gaze. He thought of Malfoy Manor's hidden vaults, of whispered spells in dead languages, of his mother's quiet warnings about magic, that remembers too much. He sighed. "Fine. But if we're chasing ghosts, Lovegood, you're leading. I've spent enough of my life running from them." Rain tapped a quiet rhythm against the Ministry's enchanted windows, each droplet glowing faintly as it hit the glass, dissolving into silver mist before siding down. Luna Lovegood stood just inside the threshold of the Department of Mystery's antechamber, her fingers curled around the strap of a worn satchel lined with protective runes. The air hummed with restrained energy, the sort that prickled behind the eyes and made candle flames flicker, gold and violet at the edges. "Miss Lovegood," said a clipped voice from the shadows. Senior Undersecretary Thalia Greaves emerged, her robes stiff with authority, a quill already hovering at her shoulder, scribbling in invisible ink. "You're late." "I wasn't late," Luna replied, tilting her head slightly. "I arrived precisely when I was meant to. The Derrickal outside your office winked at me. That's always a good sign." Greaves blinked, unamused. "Be that as it may, the situation has escalated. The spellbook has rewritten 3 entries in the restricted archive already. One of them caused the entire west wing of the British Archives to float into the Thames." Luna's pale eyes widened with something like wonder. "Oh, I suppose that would be inconvenient for the filing system." "It's beyond inconvenient. It's a breach of magical containment. Hence your appointment as lead investigator." Greaves stepped aside, revealing a figure leaning against a column, arms crossed, one eyebrow arched in reluctant amusement. "Draco Malfoy." "You've got to be joking," he said, pushing off the stone. "You're assigning Star her star, and pairing her with Star me star." "Precisely," Greaves said. "Miss Lovegood has unparalleled knowledge of ancient magical linguistics, and, unorthodox as it may be, demonstrated aptitude in stabilizing anomalous artifacts. You, Mr. Malfoy, represent the only known living descendant with documented access to Ravenclaw-aligned wards through your maternal line. Your family's ancestral grimoires contain protections that may interface with the spellbook's core enchantments. Draco's jaw tautened. My family doesn't talk about those grimoires. Then it's time they did, Luna said softly. She looked at him, not with challenge, but with a quiet curiosity, as if he were a puzzle she had only just begun to solve. The spellbook didn't choose to wake up. It was Star called Star, and if it's speaking in Ravenclaw's hand, then someone, or something, wanted it found. A silence settled between them, broken only by the distant echo of footsteps, and the faint chime of the levitating inkwell drifting past the doorway. Draco exhaled sharply. And you expect me to believe this isn't some elaborate ministry trap to dig up old loyalties? No, Luna said. I expect you to come because you're afraid, like I am, that if we don't, the next thing to vanish won't be an archive. It'll be a person, or a memory, or time itself, unraveling one forgotten spell at a time. He studied her then, not the oddity the ministry whispered about, not the dreamy ex-student of Hogwarts, but someone who had walked through fire and still spoke to the stars. Something in her gaze made the air feel thinner, as if the world had leaned in to listen. Fine, he said at last. But I set the terms. No Auror escort, no tracking charms, and if the book starts reciting poetry in Parseltum, I'm walking. Luna smiled, faint and knowing. It already did, at midnight. 3 stanzas about tides and lost keys. I wrote them down. Draco muttered something under his breath. Something that sounded suspiciously like Star. This is going to be a disaster, Star. But he didn't weave. Outside, the rain stopped abruptly. The mist curled upward, forming shapes, brief, shimmering spirals that looked almost like wings. Luna touched her satchel. It's listening, she whispered. It knows we've begun. Rain tapped softly against the high-arched windows of the restricted archive, a quiet rhythm beneath the heavier silence of old parchment and older magic. Luna Lovegood stood barefoot on the cold stone floor, her toes curling slightly as she traced a finger along the spine of the book resting on the central obsidian pedestal. It shimmered faintly, like oil on water, its surface never quite still. The letters along its edge shifted when unobserved, sometimes in ancient runes, sometimes in a language no scholar had ever named. It's breathing, Luna murmured, not turning. Draco Malfoy, arms crossed, leaned against a bookshelf with the air of someone enduring a particularly tedious social obligation. It's not breathing, it's unstable magic. There's a difference. She smiled, as if he'd just made her point for her. So is a person, technically. But we still call it breathing. He exhaled through his nose, a sound of practiced patience worn thin. You've had it contained for 3 days. It's rewritten the enchantments on the pedestal twice, transfigured a quill into a hummingbird, and made the west corridor smell like burnt cinnamon. That's not wonder, Lovegood. That's danger. Luna turned then, her wide pale eyes meeting his with unnerving clarity. Danger and wonder often wear the same face. You just have to know how to look. Draco's jaw tightened. He'd been summoned from Wiltshire under ministry order, pulled from the quiet restoration of Malfoy ancestral wards, a project meant to distance himself from old allegiances, old names. Now he was here, trapped in a vault beneath the British Museum with a woman who spoke to invisible creatures and believed in Crumplehorn Snorkax. And yet, the book, the Ravenclaw grimoire, was unlike anything he'd seen. Even his family's oldest tomes, bound in shadow leather and whispered to contain spells lost to the Dark Ages, had never moved Star like this. Its pages fluttered without wind. Ink bloomed and receded like tide on sand, forming and dissolving incantations in real time. It's responding to something, Luna said, crouching beside the pedestal. Not just magic, emotion, memory. That's absurd. Is it? She reached out, not touching, but hovering her hand above the cover. It wrote your name yesterday, in Latin, then changed it to Draco, who hides behind silence. Draco went very still. That's impossible. I didn't write it. The book did. And before that, it wrote mine. Luna, who listens to the in-between. A draft curled through the chamber, though the doors were sealed. The candles flickered, their flames turning blue at the edges. Draco stepped forward, finally drawn by something other than duty. "You're saying it's sentient?" "No," Luna said softly. "I'm saying it remembers. Rowena Ravenclaw didn't just write spells. She wrote questions. The book, it's still looking for answers." She stood, brushing dust from her robes that looked like they'd been sewn from patchwork dreams, dyed in moonlight and stitched with silver thread. Draco hesitated. "Then why us?" Luna tilted her head, as if listening to a voice only she could hear. "Perhaps because you understand legacy," she said, "and I understand loss. The book feels both." He wanted to scoff, wanted to remind her that he'd grown past the boy who sneered in corridors, who measured worth by blood and name. But the truth was heavier. He'd spent years trying to unwrite his own history, and now here was a book that could do just that. Outside, the rain grew heavier. Inside, the grimoire pulsed once, softly, like a heartbeat, and in the silence that followed, Draco realized something else. He didn't want to destroy it. He wanted to understand it. Luna watched him, unsmiling now, but with a kindness that felt more piercing than judgment. "We'll need to open it together," she said. "It won't let just anyone turn the page." Draco looked at his hands. Pale, precise, trained in incantations passed down for centuries. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Together," he said, and the book, as if in approval, exhaled a breath of silver light that curled around their wrists like a promise. Rain tapped against the high windows of the ministry's restricted archives, a soft, persistent rhythm like fingers tracing the spine of an old book. Luna Lovegood stood motionless in the dim glow of enchanted candles, her pale fingers hovering just above the surface of the spellbook. It lay open on a slab of black basalt, its pages no longer still. Ink swirled and resettled like dark water disturbed by unseen currents, forming symbols that hadn't existed an hour ago. "It's breathing," she thought, not with lungs but with memory. Draco Malfoy leaned against the far wall, arms crossed, his silver eyes narrowed. He'd been silent since they'd arrived, watching the book with the kind of wary fascination one might reserve for a sleeping dragon. "It's responding to something," he said finally, voice low. "Not just ambient magic, intent." Luna tilted her head as if listening to a sound only she could hear. "It remembers her," she murmured. "Rowena. She's in the margins, in the spaces between letters, like a whisper caught in paper." He pushed off a wall and stepped closer, careful not to touch the stand. "Then why show us this now? Why rewrite itself after 1,000 years?" Luna didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into the pocket of her long flowing coat and pulled out a magnifying lens framed in moonstone. She held it over the newest script, a series of angular runes encircling a central sigil that pulsed vaguely, like a heartbeat. "This isn't just a spell," she said. "It's a key, a cipher." Malfoy exhaled sharply. Of course, Ravenclaw never left anything unguarded. Not knowledge, not secrets. She traced the outer ring with the tip of her wand, whispering a soft incantation. The runes flared, then shifted, rearranging into a pattern that made Malfoy stiffen. "That's old high arcanum," he said. "Predates Parseltongue in some texts. My grandmother used fragments of it during blood rituals. Never fully taught me. Said it was too dangerous for idle curiosity." Luna smiled faintly. "Curiosity isn't idle when it's guided by respect." The sigil at the center began to spin, slowly at first, then faster, until it blurred into a spiral of silver light. Shadows in the room deepened, stretching unnaturally across the floor. A low hum filled the air, resonant and ancient, vibrating in their bones. Then, words not spoken but felt, echoing in their minds. "Star where thought outlives stone, and silence guards the spire's bone. There the first mind rests unbound by time or tomb." The loose star, the light faded. The book stilled. Malfoy blinked. That wasn't just a riddle, that was a summons. Luna closed her eyes, breathing deeply. "The lost Athenaeum," she whispered. "Rowena's private library. It wasn't destroyed. It was hidden, veiled behind a fold in magical space, accessible only to those who speak her language." He turned to her, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. "And you think we're the ones it's choosing to find it?" She met his eyes, her own wide and steady. "It's not about choosing, Draco. It's about resonance. The book knows when two minds, opposite yet aligned, come close enough to complete a forgotten frequency. He looked away, jaw tightening. You sound like one of your father's Quibbler articles. Maybe, she said softly. He wasn't wrong as often as people believed. A silence settled between them, heavier than before. The rain outside had slowed to a hush. The candles flickered, casting their shadows long against the shelves. Finally, Malfoy straightened. If this Athenaeum exists, it'll be warded, protected by more than riddles. Ravenclaw wouldn't trust knowledge to just anyone. No, Luna agreed. But she might trust someone who still believes in the impossible. He glanced at her, and for the first time since they'd begun this journey, there was no sarcasm in his voice when he spoke. Then let's hope that's enough. The air in the Ministry's restricted archives hummed with silence, thick and expectant, like the breath before a storm. Luna Lovegood stood motionless before the ancient oak table, her fingers hovering just above the Ravenclaw spellbook. Its cover, once plain and cracked with age, now shimmered with veins of silver light that pulsed like slow heartbeats. The script upon its surface shifted constantly, words in forgotten tongues, diagrams that rearranged themselves into new constellations, symbols that seemed to watch them. Draco Malfoy stood a few paces back, arms crossed, his gray eyes narrowed. "This isn't just a book," he said, voice low. "It's a trap or a doorway, possibly both." Luna didn't turn. "It's remembering," she whispered. "It's found a piece of itself." She traced a fingertip along one of the glowing lines. The moment she made contact, the room shuddered. Not violently, but with a soft liquid ripple. Books on nearby shelves bent sideways, candle flames stretched into long ribbons of gold, and the stone floor seemed to breathe. Then, with a sound like glass breaking under water, the air before the spellbook cracked open. A mirror stood there, tall, framed in silver ivy, its surface not reflecting the archive, but showing instead a library that was and was not their own. The shelves stretched impossibly high, curving into a sky of shifting ink and starlight. Books fluttered like birds between floating ladders, and the air shimmered with softly drifting motes of light. "Merlin's ghost," Draco breathed, taking an involuntary step back. Luna smiled. "No, not a ghost. A memory. This is the archive of echoes, the library, as it was meant to be, before we started forgetting how to listen." Before Draco could protest, the spellbook snapped shut, and then flew open again with a violent burst of light. The mirror rippled, and an invisible force yanked them both forward. Draco reached for the table, fingers scraping wood, but the pull was relentless. Luna didn't resist. She stepped into the mirror willingly, her robes fluttering as though caught in an unseen wind. And then they were through. The world reassembled around them in fragments. The scent of old paper and rain-soaked moss filled the air. The ground beneath their feet was not stone, but something like solidified mist, soft, yielding, yet firm enough to walk on. Above, the vaulted ceiling was not there. Instead, constellations spun slowly in a vast indigo sky, each star shaped like a different rune. Books lined the horizon in spiraling towers, some open mid-air, pages turning on their own. A spectral figure in tattered blue robes glided past, humming a tune that made Draco's teeth ache with forgotten longing. "This is impossible," he muttered, touching the sleeve of his robe, as if to confirm he was still real. "Possible is just a word people use to avoid wonder," Luna replied, stepping lightly onto a floating staircase that spiraled up toward a cluster of glowing tomes. "The founders built more than schools and spells. They built memories that could think for themselves. This place remembers Rowena, and now it remembers her book." Draco watched as the spellbook in her hands pulsed again, brighter this time. A soft chime echoed through the library, and from the shadows between the shelves, eyes opened, hundreds of them, pale and silver, watching. "We're not alone," he said, hand instinctively going to his wand. "No," Luna agreed calmly. "We're not, but they won't harm us, not unless we try to take what isn't ours." She turned to him, her wide eyes reflecting the starlight. "You feel it, don't you? The pull, the sense that something here knows your name." Draco hesitated. He did feel it, a whisper in the back of his mind, a phrase in a language he'd never learned, but somehow understood. Star serpens solus non sibilant. Star. The serpent does not hiss alone. He's swallowed. And if I don't want to be known, then you'll never find the way back, Luna said gently. This place doesn't care about secrets, only truth. A book detached itself from a nearby shelf and drifted toward them, its cover emblazoned with an Ouroboros made of stars. It opened mid-air, and a single sentence formed in elegant script. Star. To return, you must first be found. Star. The air inside the mirrored archive hummed with a quiet intelligence, like the breath of a sleeping mind too vast to comprehend. Every surface, walls, ceiling, floor, reflected not just their figures, but fragmented echoes. Luna as a child, reading under a willow. Draco kneeling beside a burning family ledger. Moments they'd never shared with each other. The spellbook floated between them, its silver pages now edged in shifting runes that dissolved like smoke before settling again. Luna stepped forward, her bare feet silent against the glass-like floor. It's not just showing us reflections, she murmured. It's showing us truths we've hidden, even from ourselves. Draco's jaw tightened. He hadn't liked seeing that night, the one where he'd burned the Malfoy records, the ones implicating his father in darker arts. He hadn't known anyone had seen it, not even himself, not really, until now. A voice, neither male nor female, resonated from everywhere and nowhere. To pass you must answer not with knowledge, but with intent. Two figures emerged from the reflections, translucent, robed in ancient Hogwarts uniforms, their eyes glowing like moonlight on water. One held a quill that dripped ink like falling stars, the other cradled a scale balanced on a single feather. The first trial, said the quill-bearer. Why do you seek the Ravenclaw spellbook? Draco answered first, voice clipped. To contain it. The Ministry believes it's destabilizing magical ley lines. I'm here to neutralize the threat. The scale tipped sharply downward. Luna tilted her head, studying the imbalance. But that's not the whole reason, is it, Draco? He turned to her, surprised. Isn't it? No, she said gently. You're here because you want to know if your family's magic can mean something other than fear. You want to rewrite what was written for you. The scale trembled, then lifted, just slightly. The second scholar stepped forward. Then tell us, what is truth in magic? Draco hesitated. Truth is power, precision, bloodline. The strength of the spell depends on the purity of its source. The mirrors rippled, distorting his reflection into a figure cloaked in shadow, wand raised in domination. Luna closed her eyes. Truth in magic is listening, not to incantations but to the silence between them. Magic remembers what we forget. It speaks in whispers, the hum of a beetle's wing, the way mist curls around a stone. Truth isn't in control, it's in surrender. Mirrors stilled. Her reflection shimmered, not as a witch, but as a constellation woven into the shape of a woman, stars pulsing in rhythm with her breath. The scholars exchanged a glance. The quill wrote a single word in the air, Star, Athena Star, before dissolving. You understand, the first said, but understanding is not enough. The spellbook chooses who may hold it. The book drifted toward Luna, but stopped mid-air, hovering. Then it turned, facing Draco. He froze. That's impossible. It's Ravenclaw's heir who should command it, not a Malfoy. The book does not care for surnames, Luna said softly. It cares for resonance, for the desire to change. It's a trick, Draco said, but his voice wavered. This place plays with your mind. Perhaps, Luna agreed. But isn't that how truth finds us? In the cracks of what we believe? The book floated closer to him. A page turned on its own, revealing a diagram, a serpent eating its tail. But within its body, a phoenix unfolded its wings. Beneath it, a line in Old Gaelic glowed. Star. To inherit wisdom, one must first unlearn pride. Star. Draco's breath caught. That phrase, his mother had whispered it once the night before the final battle, as she pressed his head and said, Star. You don't have to be him, Draco. Star. He reached out. Slowly, not with command, but with hesitation, openness. The moment his fingers brushed the cover, the archive blazed with light. Reflections melted into one another. Luna dancing in the rain at the burrow, Draco placing a white rose on his father's grave, the spellbook pulsing like a heart between them. And deep within its pages, a new line began to form, ink spreading like dawn across parchment, not in Rowena's hand, but in theirs. Rain fell in silver sheets over the ruins of the old Greywick archive, but it wasn't water that darkened to crumbling stone. It was ink, thick, glimmering, and alive, pouring from the pages of the Rowena Ravenclaw spellbook, clutched in Luna Lovegood's gloved hands. The book trembled like a caged bird, its spine cracked open to reveal swirling script that reformed with every breath. Words peeled from the parchment and spiraled into the air, solidifying into quills, inkwells, and fragments of forgotten incantations that hissed as they fell. "It's rewriting the sky," Luna murmured, her voice soft but steady. She tilted her head back, watching as the storm painted the clouds with glowing runes in a language that hadn't been spoken since the fall of Avalon. Draco Malfoy stood a few paces behind her, his wand raised, face drawn taut with effort. "It's not just the sky, Lovegood. Look." Around them, the shattered walls of the archive began to move. Stone letters, once carved into lintels and pillars, pried themselves free and reassembled mid-air, forming new sentences that pulsed with eerie light. A sentence from a lost treatise on celestial magic twisted into a binding curse, lashing out like a whip toward Draco. He deflected it with a sharp flick of his wrist and a whispered countercharm, but more were already forming. "They're not just texts," he said, breathing hard. "They're memories. The book isn't just summoning ink, it's summoning meaning, and it's angry." Luna turned, her wide eyes catching the stormlight. "It doesn't know it's dangerous. It only knows it was forgotten. That's a kind of loneliness, don't you think?" Draco scoffed, though there was less bite to it than he intended. "Sentiment won't stop a hex made of poetry." A nearby fountain, long dry, suddenly gurgled to life, not with water, but with ink. From its basin rose a figure, a scribe, faceless and robed, its fingers ending in quills. It stepped forward, ink dripping from its sleeves, and began writing on the air. Each stroke sparked like flint, and the symbols it formed coiled toward them like serpents. Luna raised the book. "Stop, you don't have to do this." The scribe paused. The runes it had written shimmered, then rearranged into a single word. "Star." "Why, star?" "Because you're hurting people," Luna said gently, and Rowena would never have wanted that. The scribe tilted its head. Then slowly it reached into its chest and pulled out a scroll, brittle, yellowed, sealed with a wax sigil of an eagle in flight. It held it out. Draco narrowed his eyes. "It's a trap, or a memory," Luna whispered. She stepped forward, unfastening a small vial from her belt. "This is a containment charm. If I absorb the ink, the constructs might dissolve." "You'll burn out your own magic," Draco warned. "That's not just ink, that's raw magical memory. And if I don't, it'll rewrite the entire valley. Maybe more." She uncorked the vial. "You once told me in 5th year that blood purity was about legacy. But legacy isn't ownership, Draco. It's responsibility. This book, it's not yours. It's not mine. But it's ours to protect now." For a moment he didn't move. Then, with a sharp exhale, he stepped beside her. "If you're going to be noble, at least let me stand in the way of the killing curse." She smiled, faint but real. "Always." Luna poured the vial over the book. The inkstorm shrieked, a sound like 1,000 pages tearing. The scribe dissolved into droplets that hovered, trembling, before being drawn into the spellbook like breath, into lungs. The storm slowed. The runes faded. The air grew still. But in the silence, one word remained, glowing faintly on the ground where the scribe had stood. "Star, remember." The air smelled of burnt parchment and damp stone, the aftermath of magic gone awry clinging to the ruined chamber like a fever dream. Moonlight seeped through the fractured stained glass window, casting jagged patterns across the floor where Draco lay on his side, one arm curled beneath him, breath shallow and uneven. His wand lay a few inches from his outstretched fingers, its tip still smoking faintly, as though it had tried too hard and given up. Luna knelt beside him, her robe smudged with soot and something darker, ink, perhaps, or the residue of broken enchantments. She didn't speak at first. Instead, she placed a cool hand on his forehead, brushing back the damp strands of hair stuck to his skin. Her touch was steady, unafraid. "You're alive," she said, not as a question, but as confirmation. Draco winced as he tried to push himself up. Barely. You took the brunt of the backlash, she murmured. That wasn't just protection magic. That was sacrifice. He let out a bitter laugh, but it cracked halfway. Sacrifice? I failed. My spells dissolved before they even reached the wards. I couldn't. His voice caught. I couldn't keep you safe. Luna tilted her head, studying him as if he'd spoken in riddles. You were the only one who stood between me and that curse. You threw yourself in front of it. That's not failure, Draco. That's courage. He turned his face away, jaw tight. Courage doesn't matter if the magic fails. My father always said that the strength of a wizard is measured by his bloodline and his control. Luna finished softly. But magic isn't always about control. Sometimes it listens to other things. To kindness, to trust. Draco exhaled sharply. Trust? I spent my life learning not to trust. Certainly not to be trusted. And yet here you are, she said gently. Still breathing. Still trying. A silence settled between them, broken only by the distant drip of water through the cracks in the ceiling. The spellbook lay a few feet away, its cover now sealed shut, glowing faintly with a soft, pulsing light, like a heartbeat slowing after panic. It's strange, Luna said, watching the glow. The book rewrote itself when you stepped in front of me. It wasn't supposed to do that. It was supposed to protect itself, but it changed. Draco looked at her, his gray eyes shadowed. You still don't understand. I wasn't strong enough. I felt the spell unravel in my hands. It was like trying to hold smoke. Maybe, Luna said. It wasn't meant to be held at all. Maybe it was meant to be given. He frowned. What are you talking about? She reached for his hand, not demanding, just offering. After a long pause, he let her take it. Her fingers were warm, slightly calloused from turning ancient pages and handling enchanted relics. The Ravenclaw spellbook doesn't respond to power the way we expect, she said. It doesn't want dominance, it wants understanding. And when you choose to protect instead of command, something shifted. Draco closed his eyes. I didn't choose anything, it just happened. Exactly, she whispered. The best things always do. He opened his eyes then, searching hers. There was no pity in her gaze, only quiet certainty, the kind that unsettled him more than any accusation ever had. You trust me, he said, almost accusingly. Yes, she answered simply. Why? Because you're here. Because you stayed. Because when the magic failed, you didn't run. And because, she added, a small smile touching her lips, you believed in me enough to try, even when you didn't believe in yourself. Draco swallowed hard, the weight of her words pressing against something deep and long buried inside him. He didn't know how to respond. He wasn't used to being seen, not like this, not without judgment or expectation. Outside, the wind stirred the ivy clinging to the tower walls. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. A soft, questioning sound. Luna squeezed his hand once, then released it. Rest now. The book is quiet. We're safe. And tomorrow, she said, rising to her feet, we'll keep going. He watched her walk toward the broken window, her silhouette framed by the pale moon, and for the first time in years, Draco Malfoy felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not peace, not yet, but the fragile, trembling possibility of it. Rain tapped a slow rhythm against the stained glass windows of the restricted section, each drop like a whispered secret against the glass. Luna Lovegood stood barefoot on the cold stone, her fingers tracing the spine of an ancient tome bound in silver thread and howl feathers. The air hummed, not with magic, but with memory. The spellbook lay open on a pedestal of petrified yew, its pages shifting like sand beneath an unseen tide, ink blooming and retreating like tides on a midnight shore. Words formed in languages no living wizard could speak, then dissolved into spirals that pulsed faintly with blue light. Draco Malfoy leaned against a shelf, arms crossed, his usual sneer tempered by something quieter, wariness perhaps, or the reluctant awe of a man who'd spent his life believing in control, only to find the world rewriting itself without permission. It's getting worse, he said, voice low. Last night a portrait in the Malfoy library started reciting prophecies in Parseltongue. My mother thought she'd gone mad. Luna tilted her head as if listening to a sound only she could hear. The book remembers sorrow, she murmured. Rowena didn't just want knowledge, she wanted understanding, but grief twisted her final spell, like a lullaby sung in a storm. A sudden chill cut through the room. The candles guttered, their flames bending sideways though no wind stirred. Then, from the shadows between two towering bookcases, a figure emerged, translucent, serene, crowned with a diadem of starlight. Rowena Ravenclaw's ghost hovered just above the floor, her eyes deep as wells of forgotten time. Draco stepped back, hand instinctively reaching for his wand. Luna did not move. "Daughter of moonlit thoughts," the ghost said, her voice a chorus of distant bells. "You hear what others ignore. That is both your burden and your gift." Luna smiled faintly. "Hello, Rowena." The ghost's gaze shifted to Draco. "And you, heir of fractured pride. You carry a name steeped in old magic and older mistakes, yet you are here. That counts for something." He didn't answer, but his jaw tightened. The air shimmered, and words began to form in the space before them, glowing, deliberate, etched in light. "Star knowledge without kindness becomes a curse." Star. The moment the sentence solidified, the spellbook snapped shut with a sound like a sigh. Then slowly it reopened, this time the pages blank, waiting. Luna stepped forward. "It's not just about recovering the book," she said, more to Draco than to the ghost. "It's about healing it. The enchantments spreading across the world, they're not accidents, they're echoes of regret." Draco exhaled sharply. "So what? We write a kinder spell. Is that how this works?" "Perhaps," Luna said. "Or perhaps we answer the riddle first. Why a quill? Why ink that rewrites itself?" Rowena's spirit drifted closer to the pedestal. "I sought perfection in knowledge. I believed truth could stand alone, unburdened by emotion. But the heart shapes the mind, as the hand shapes the quill. When I realized too late that I had shut out love, I bound my regret into the book. It was meant to teach. Instead, it began to unmake." A silence settled, thick with meaning. Draco looked at the blank pages, then at Luna, really looked. She stood barefoot in a robe, dusted with dried moodoo blossoms, her hair tangled, her eyes clear and unafraid. He thought of his father's cold library, of shelves lined with tomes that whispered power but never comfort. He thought of the way Luna had spoken to house elves like equals, of how she'd once sent him a birthday note with a pressed dirigible plum and the words, "Star, you're more curious than you let on. Star, you think the answer," he said slowly, "is not in finding the right spell, but in becoming the right kind of seeker." Luna turned to him, and for the first time, her smile reached her eyes like sunlight breaking through cloud. "Exactly." Above them, the ghost of Rowena Ravenclaw nodded once, then faded, leaving only the scent of old parchment and a single feather, drifting down to rest upon the open page. The wind howled through the crags like a chorus of forgotten voices, carrying with it the scent of damp stone and snow-laden heather. Luna Lovegood stepped lightly across the frostbitten moor, her breath curling in silver wisps beneath the pale light of a waning moon. Behind her, Draco Malfoy muttered something under his breath, probably a complaint about the weather, or the boots that weren't meant for hiking through cursed highland bogs. But Luna didn't turn. She was listening, not with her ears. The spellbook, bound in faded blue leather and sealed with a tarnished silver clasp, pulsed faintly against her chest, tucked inside her cloak. It had begun rewriting itself 3 days ago, ink bleeding across blank pages in a looping, archaic script that shifted when stared at too long. Words rearranged themselves. Symbols glimmered like embers before vanishing, and always it tugged them north. "This is madness," Draco said, stepping over a tangle of brambles that seemed to writhe as he passed. "Ruined castles don't preserve anything, especially Mount Ravenclaw's study. That's folklore for children." "Folklore is just history wearing a disguise," Luna replied, pausing beside a standing stone slick with moss. She pressed her palm to its surface. A low hum resonated beneath her skin, like the memory of the song. "This stone remembers her. Can't you feel it?" Draco scoffed, but he didn't argue. That was Mew. Not long ago, he would have turned on his heel and disapparated the moment the ministry assigned him to work with her. But something had changed. Perhaps the way the air shimmered whenever the spellbook opened, or the way the stars blinked out of alignment over London last night, replaced by constellations no one had seen since the Middle Ages. He adjusted the strap of his satchel. filled with protective wards, bottled moonlight, and a crumbling scroll on founder-aligned sigils. "You said the ruins were near a loch," he reminded her. "Not near," Luna said, stepping forward again. "In it." Ahead, the land dipped sharply into a narrow valley choked with mist. Below, the black mirror of a loch stretched into shadow, its surface so still it looked solid. And rising from its center, half submerged and draped in Idaean frost, stood the broken silhouette of a tower, its arched windows gaping like hollow eyes. "That can't be stable," Draco whispered. "It's held for nearly 1,000 years, Luna said. "Magic doesn't fall apart when you stop believing in it. Only people do." She stepped onto the loch's edge. The water did not ripple. Instead, a path of pale stones rose from the depths, glowing faintly blue. Draco stared. "You knew this would happen." "I hoped," she said, stepping onto the first stone. Rowena always liked riddles. She believed truth should be earned. He hesitated, just a breath, then followed. The moment his foot touched the second stone, the air thickened, shadows deepened, the wind died, and from within the submerged tower, something stirred. A low chime echoed through the water, vibrating up through their bones. The stones beneath their feet pulsed brighter. Then a voice, neither male nor female, but ancient layered with time, spoke from everywhere and nowhere. She who sought knowledge beyond the veil, where mind outgrows the body's cage. What did she name the price? Star Luna didn't flinch. Draco's hand went to his wand, but she raised a finger. "Wait." She called it solitude, Luna answered softly, "because to know everything is to be forever misunderstood." Silence. Then the tower groaned. The water parted. The path extended, climbing toward the ruin's shattered doorway. Draco exhaled. "You're either brilliant or completely mad." Luna smiled. "Isn't that the same thing sometimes?" They stepped forward together, into the dark. The air in the tower tasted of old parchment and dabbed stone, thick with the hum of a spell long forgotten. Luna stepped forward first, her bare feet silent against the moss-slicked floor, her wand held high. The tip glowed with a soft silver light that shimmered like moonlight on water, casting long shadows that flickered and curled like living things. Behind her, Draco paused, his breath shallow, his fingers twitching at his side. He didn't trust silence, not here, not in a place that had no right to exist. "This wasn't on any map," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "No," Luna agreed, turning to face him. Her eyes, wide and pale as mist, reflected the light in an eerie, knowing way. It wasn't meant to be. Before them, a spiral staircase wound upward into darkness, its steps carved from pale-veined marble. But the stairs didn't stay still. They shifted, sliding, twisting, folding into one another, like the pages of a restless book. One moment they led up, the next they curled downward, then vanished entirely before reforming in a new configuration. A low whisper threaded through the air. Not quite words, but something older, questions without voices. Draco took a cautious step forward. The stone beneath his foot groaned, the staircase shivered, and 3 steps crumbled into dust, leaving a gap too wide to cross. Luna didn't flinch. "It only moves for truth," she said, as if commenting on the weather. "Not cleverness, not pride, just truth." He scoffed, though it sounded hollow even to himself. "And what, exactly, am I supposed to be truthful about? My favorite color? My childhood fears?" She tilted her head, studying him. "You already know the answer, Draco." He clenched his jaw. The air grew heavier, pressing against his chest like an invisible hand. Another step forward, and the staircase shifted again. This time the path ahead split into 2. One spiraled upward, steep and narrow. The other dipped into a dark archway, its entrance veiled by a curtain of ivy threaded with silver blossoms. A voice, dry as autumn leaves, spoke from the walls. "Star, what do you doubt?" Star Draco froze. Luna turned to him, her face serene. "It won't let you pass until you answer." "I don't." He stopped himself. The lie tasted bitter. The tower knew, and had always known. He exhaled, slow and unsteady. "I doubt that I belong here." The words scraped against his pride, raw and foreign. "That I can help. That any of this mission, this magic matters. Not after everything I've done. Not after who I was." The silence that followed was deeper than before. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Then softly a single step reformed. Solid, steady, leading upward. Luna's smile small and quiet. That wasn't so hard, was it? He looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time since they'd left the ministry, there was no mockery in her eyes, no judgment. Only understanding, gentle, unshakable. "I hate that you make honesty look easy," he said. "It's not easy," she replied, stepping onto the newly formed stair. "It's just necessary, like breathing." They climbed, the steps now shifting with purpose rather than confusion. Each turn brought them higher, the air growing thinner, colder. Yet with every step, Draco felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not peace, not yet, but the faintest stirring of possibility. Halfway up, the staircase halted, and a new voice emerged, not from the walls, but from the space between heartbeats. "Star, what do you fear?" Star. Luna paused, her hand resting on the balustrade of woven starlight and thorn. Draco glanced at her. "Going first?" She shook her head. "This one's yours." He closed his eyes. "I'm afraid that even if I try, it won't be enough. That I'll fail again. That I'll let someone down. Someone who actually believed in me." The words hung in the air, fragile as glass. The staircase trembled, then rose, step by deliberate step, revealing a doorway of ancient oak, carved with the sigil of an open eye. Luna reached for his hand. Her fingers were cool, steady. "Then let's make sure it's enough," she said. "Together." Rain fell in silver sheets over the ruins of Gwydryn's spire, a forgotten watchtower clinging to the edge of a Scottish cliff, its stones slick with centuries of wind and mist. Luna Lovegood stepped lightly across the broken threshold, her boots silent on the moss-slicked flagstones. She carried no umbrella, she never did, but droplets seemed to curve around her, as if the air itself held its breath in her presence. Behind her, Draco Malfoy paused, his cloak drawn tight against the chill, his jaw set in that familiar mix of irritation and reluctant awe. "This is it?" he asked, eyeing the hollow shell of the tower. "A pile of rubble in bad weather?" Luna turned, her pale eyes catching the faint luminescence of the storm-lit sky. "Not rubble, remembered stone. It knows we're here." She raised a hand, and from the shadows of the tower's upper chamber, something stirred. A soft chime rang through the air, delicate, crystalline, like glass struck by a winter wind. Then another, and another. From the shattered windows shapes emerged, gliding on silent wings, made of light and fragile transparency. Ravens, but not of flesh or feather. These were spun from enchanted glass, their forms catching the storm's glow, refracting it into scattered rainbows that danced across the walls. Draco stepped back. "Those words in the records?" "No," Luna said, stepping forward. "They were forgotten." Rowena didn't trust ink. She trusted memory. And glass remembers everything, if you know how to ask. The ravens circled above, their wings whispering against the air, each one bearing faint runes etched into their wings or along their slender necks. Some were cracked, others dim, their light fading. One, perched on a broken arch, had a wing that ended in jagged shards, trembling as if in pain. "They're guardians," Luna murmured, "but they're broken. The spellbook isn't just rewriting itself, it's calling to them, trying to remember what it lost." Draco watched as she reached into her satchel and drew out a slender rod of moonstone, humming under her breath. "And you can fix them, if they let me," she said simply. "They don't obey, they listen." She approached the damaged raven on the arch. It tilted its head, its glass eyes flickering with an inner pulse. Luna raised the moonstone, and a soft silver thread spilled from its tip, like liquid starlight. She didn't speak a spell, she sang. A wordless melody, low and haunting, the kind that seemed to rise from the earth itself. The raven shivered. As the song wound through the air, the broken wing began to mend. Shards lifted, drawn together by invisible hands, fusing not with a crack, but with a sigh. The runes along its feathers glowed, and stabilized. When the last note faded, the raven spread its wings, whole again, and let out a chime that rang clear across the storm. Draco exhaled. "That was unexpected." Luna smiled faintly. "You expected a counterspell, but some magic isn't controlled, it's invited." One by one, the glass ravens descended, forming a silent circle around her. Each bore its own fracture, its own forgotten charm. Some needed song, others, a touch. One required only silence. Luna sat beside it for nearly 10 minutes, her hand hovering just above its chest, until the crack across its body sealed like a wound, remembering how to heal. Draco watched, arms crossed, but his posture softened. "Why do they respond to you?" She looked at him then, really looked, her gaze steady. "Because I don't ask them to serve. I ask if they remember. And they do. They've been waiting." A single raven, a smaller than the rest, its firm, blurred as if seen through mist, landed at her feet. Its runes were nearly gone, worn smooth by time. Luna knelt. "This one holds the charm for truth-speaking. It was used in the old debates of the Ravenclaw Tower, before pride got in the way." She touched its head gently. "Do you remember your voice?" The raven blinked. Then faintly a whisper of sound, like a bell underwater, rose from its core. The runes flared once, and the air between them shimmered with a single perfect word. "Star, remember." Star. Draco felt something shift in his chest, something older than cynicism. He didn't speak, but when Luna stood and the ravens took flight once more, spiraling into the storm like shards of a shattered constellation, he didn't look away. The tower room was bathed in silver, the enchanted skylight above them mimicking the open night sky with such clarity that Draco could count the stars if he cared to. A soft hum resonated from the old stone walls, a quiet echo of the spellbook resting between them on a low table of dark polished yew. It pulsed faintly, like a sleeping heart, its pages shifting in slow, deliberate waves as though breathing. Luna sat cross-legged, her chin resting on one palm, eyes wide and unblinking, fixed on the constellations above. "It's the same sky," she said quietly, "the one Rowena would have seen. These stars have watched every secret this castle has ever kept." Draco exhaled, leaning back against the cold stone latch. "That's romantic. I prefer knowing which stars bring misfortune. My mother used to read them like tea leaves." Luna turned her head slowly, a small smile playing at her lips. "You don't believe in misfortune. You believe in control, and you believe in moonfrogs and invisible creatures that hum in the walls." "I believe in what the world chooses to show me," she corrected gently. "And sometimes it shows me things others don't see, like how this spellbook isn't rewriting itself. It's remembering." He frowned, glancing at the book. "That's semantics, is it? When you forget a spell, do you say it's gone, or only that you've misplaced it in your mind?" Draco paused. He looked at her, then really looked, at the way the starlight caught in her tangled hair, the quiet certainty at her gaze. "You think magic has memory." "I think magic is memory," she said. "It remembers the hands that shaped it, the hearts that believed in it. That's why ancient spells are stronger, not because they're old, but because they've been loved." He scoffed, but there was no real edge to it. "Love, that's what the Ministry fears. Unpredictable, irrational emotion. This book doesn't need love. It needs containment." "And yet," Luna said, leaning forward, "containment hasn't worked. Binding spells slid off it. Wards failed. It didn't respond to force. But when I spoke to it, when I remembered a lullaby my mother used to sing, it calmed, pages stilled, like it recognized the tune." Draco stared. "You sang to a cursed artifact?" "She was a scholar, too," Luna murmured. "My mother, she believed every spell began as a thought, and every thought begins in the heart. The mind organizes magic, Draco, but the heart gives it meaning." A silence settled between them, not heavy, but full, like the pause before a spell takes hold. Outside, the wind brushed the turrets, whispering through the ivy. The book flickered, letters forming and dissolving in shimmering script, like ripples across water. "I used to think magic was power," Draco said. "Low and measured. Control, blood, legacy. My father taught me that. And for a long time I believed him." Luna didn't speak. She simply waited, as if she knew more was coming. "But this," he gestured to the book, "the stars, the room alive with quiet enchantment. This isn't about power. It's softer, like trying to hold smoke in your hands. And I don't know how to do soft." Luna reached out, not touching him, but resting her hand near his on the stone. "Maybe you don't have to hold it. Maybe you just have to let it pass through." He looked at her hand so close to his, pale, slender, marked with ink and faint crescent moons from where she'd pressed too hard while writing. "You're maddening. You know that?" "I've been told." A breath of laughter escaped him. "And yet, you're not wrong. About the book, about the way it responds. I felt it today, when we traced the glyph in the lower archive. It flinched at my doubt. But when you whispered that old charm, Lumine Cor Cordis, it brightened, like it was relieved." "Light of the heart's core," Luna translated softly. "Rowena used it to teach her students to cast with intention, not just incantation. She said a spell cast without feeling is like a bird without wings, loud but going nowhere." Draco stared up at the stars again. "I never learned that." "Then perhaps you're learning it now." He didn't answer, but for the first time in years he didn't feel the weight of his past pressing on his chest. Here, beneath the open sky and the pulse of ancient magic, with Luna's quiet presence beside him, he felt something unfamiliar, something like possibility. Moonlight bled through the high arched windows of the lost Athenaeum, casting silver traceries across dust-laden shelves that stretched into shadowed infinity. The air hummed with latent magic, thick as incense, and every breath tasted of parchment and ozone. Luna Lovegood stood at the center of the circular chamber, barefoot on the cold stone, her fingers hovering just above the open spellbook. It pulsed like a heartbeat, its pages now blank one moment, then scrawled with glowing runes the next. Runes that shifted languages, that rearranged themselves into patterns no single mind could decipher. Draco Malfoy leaned against a pillar, arms crossed, his usual mask of detached irony fraying at the edges. "It's rewriting itself again," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "Not just spells, something deeper. It's like it's learning." Luna didn't answer. Her eyes were closed, her breath slow, in rhythm with the book's pulse. She had felt this presence before in her dreams, faint, distant, like a voice through water. But now it was close, closer than thought. Then the air shimmered. A figure coalesced before them, translucent and luminous, clothed in deep blue robes that seemed woven from starlight. Her face was sharp with wisdom, her eyes fast with centuries. Rowena Ravenclaw did not speak at first. She simply looked at them, first at Luna, then at Draco. And in that gaze was neither judgment nor surprise, only recognition. "You've come," the spirit said, her voice like wind through ancient ivy. "Not one, but two. That is as it should be." Luna opened her eyes. "You knew we would." "I hoped," Rowena corrected gently. "The book was never meant to be held by a single hand. It was built on dialogue, on contradiction, on the meeting of minds no one would have thought to pair. Helga believed in warmth, Salazar in strength, Godric in courage, but I believed in questions. And questions have no answers until they are shared." Dre shifted. "So this is what? A test?" "A reminder," Rowena said, drifting closer. Her form flickered, and for a moment the rune changed. The Athenaeum was alive, filled with students in robes of house colors, debating at long tables, quills scratching in unison. "I made the book to remember what we forget, that magic grows not in isolation but in tension, in difference. The spells within it were never meant to be mastered. They were meant to be questioned, to be reshaped by those who dared to see magic not as law but as language." Luna stepped forward, her voice soft but steady. "And now it's unraveling because someone tried to claim it. To own it." Rowena inclined her head. "Power unbalanced collapses under its own weight." The book sensed fear, greed. It began to rewrite reality to protect itself, to find the harmony it was built upon. "But it cannot do so alone." Draco let out a breath, running a hand through his hair. "So what? Luna and I are supposed to, what? Finish it? Together?" "If you can," Rowena said. "Not as rivals, not as heirs to old feuds, but as voices that do not echo. The book will only stabilize when it is no longer sought as a prize, but understood as a conversation." A silence settled, thick, with implication. Draco looked at Luna, really looked at her, for the first time since they'd entered this forgotten vault beneath the ruins of Ravenclaw Tower. Her hair caught the moonlight like spun silver, her eyes wide with quiet certainty. He had spent years believing magic was about blood, about legacy, about control, but here, In this crumbling sanctuary of forgotten knowledge, he felt something else stir, something uncomfortable, and yet undeniable. "And if we fail," he asked. "Then the spells will continue to rewrite the world," Rowena said. "Not with malice, but with longing. Magic will keep searching for balance. It always does, but it may take centuries, or it may break what remains of your world in the process." Luna reached out, not for the book, but for Draco's hand. He flinched, and didn't pull away. "We won't fail," she said simply, and for the first time, Draco believed it might be true. Rain lashed against the arched windows of the Ravenclaw tower like fingertips drumming for entry. The storm had rolled in without warning, swallowing the twilight whole, and with it came the scent of wet stone and something sharper, ozone, tinged with the metallic whisper of broken enchantments. Luna Lovegood stood barefoot on the cold flagstones, her fingers hovering just above the ancient oak table, where the Rowena Ravenclaw spellbook lay open. Its pages shimmered faintly, as though dusted with starlight, and now and then a new glyph would bloom across the parchment like ink spreading in water. "It's reacting," she murmured, more to the air than to Draco, though she knew he was listening. Draco Malfoy stood near the doorway, wand in hand, his grey eyes scanning the shadows beyond the glass. He had argued against bringing the spellbook. Here, too exposed, too symbolic. But Luna insisted. "It remembers this place," she'd said. "And memory is magic." Now, as the wards along the tower's rim flickered like guttering candles, he regretted listening. A crack split the air, not thunder, but the unmistakable snap of a disapparition. Then another, and another. "3," Draco said sharply. "Topside. They've breached the upper balcony." Luna didn't flinch. She only tilted her head, as if listening to a melody, only she could hear. "They're not here for knowledge. They're here for profit. That's why the book recoils." "Doesn't matter what they want," Draco said, stepping forward. "They're not leaving with it." He flicked his wand. Protego horizontis. A dome of silver light flared around the table, rippling like water struck by stone. Moments later, the door burst inward. Not with magic, but with brute force, splinters flying. 3 figures cloaked in shadowed leather stepped through, their wands raised. The leader, a woman with a scar bisecting one eyebrow, sneered. "Hand over the book, Lovegood." "We know you've got it." Luna remained still. "It's not mine to give, and it's not yours to take." The second intruder, a hulking man with runes carved into his knuckles, laughed. "It's just parchment. What's it gonna do?" "Talk back." As if in answer, the spellbook snapped shut with a sound like a blade sheathing. Then the air thickened. Words began to glow in the space between them, ancient curling script hanging in midair, pulsing with a soft blue light. Luna exhaled. "It's testing them." Draco frowned. "Testing? The book knows intent," she said. "It belonged to a woman who valued wisdom over power. It won't be stolen by those who don't understand the cost." The intruders exchanged glances. The leader snarled. "Stupefy." Her spell shot forward, but the glowing script twisted, absorbing the curse like a sponge. The word "stark ignorant star" flared crimson, then dissolved into smoke. Draco smirked. "Charming." The second attacker roared and hurled a bone crusher hex. Luna raised her hand, not with her wand, but with her palm open, fingers spread. "Wait," she whispered, and the air answered. A low hum filled the chamber, rising from the book, from the stones, from the very breath in their lungs. The third intruder, silent until now, stumbled back. "It's singing," he muttered. "Can't you hear it?" The runes in the air shifted. New words formed. "Star. What do you seek?" "Star." The leader spat. "Power. Knowledge. What else is there?" The book pulsed once, then the floor beneath her feet turned to mist. She dropped to her knees, not from pain but from memory. Her face twisted. No. Visions swirled around her. Her younger self, laughing in a sunlit field, wand in hand, not for conquest, but for joy. A father's voice. "Magic is a gift, not a weapon." She screamed, not in anger, but in grief. The second intruder charged, but Draco stepped between him and the book. "You're not walking through." The man swung his wand. "Expulso." Draco deflected, but the force knocked him back. He rolled, rose, and cast not a curse, but a memory charm. Gentle, precise. "Remember what you loved before they told you to take." The man froze. His eyes glazed. A child's laughter echoed, faint, distant. And the spellbook, sensing the shift, began to glow, not with anger, but with sorrow. Luna stepped forward, her voice soft as mist. "You don't have to be thieves. You can be students. You can be seekers." Silence. Then one by one, the intruders lowered their wands. The spellbook opened once more. This time, a single line of text appeared in elegant script. Star. The greatest magic is not in taking, but in being taken by wonder. Star. The fire in the hearth of the ministry's restricted archives had burned low, casting long, trembling shadows across the stone walls. Luna Lovegood sat cross-legged on the worn rug, the ancient spellbook resting in her lap like a sleeping creature. Its leather cover, cracked and veined like old tree bark, pulsed faintly beneath her fingers. For 3 nights now, the book had been silent. No new symbols, no shifting ink, no eerie hum beneath the pages. But this morning, she had felt it stir, a whisper against her skin, like a breath from a dream. She opened it slowly, heart tapping against her ribs, and there it was. A fresh page, pristine and impossibly new, as though it had grown from the spine in the dark. The ink was still damp, glistening in the firelight, and the handwriting, her own. Not a copy, not a mimicry. Hers. The looping curves, the slight tilt to the right, the way she dotted her eyes like stars. They say the library beneath the moor only opens to those who have lost something true. The door is shaped like a sigh. You'll know it when you hear it. Bring the silver compass. Bring the man who fears his name. Star Luna exhaled, her breath catching. The man who fears his name, she murmured. A knock came at the door, sharp, precise, like a clock ticking. Draco Malfoy entered without waiting, his gray eyes scanning the room as though expecting an ambush. He wore a long charcoal coat lined with silver thread, his hair pulled back from his face. He looked weary, as though sleep had been refusing him as well. "You called," he said. "I assume it's not for tea." She lifted the book, turning it toward him. It wrote something. About us. He stepped closer, his boot heels clicking against the stone. "It's not possible. The script predates. It's in my handwriting." That stopped him. He knelt beside her, staring at the page, his breath stilled. That's not a forgery. No. And it wasn't here last night. He reached out, then hesitated. "You think it knows us?" "I think it's learning," Luna said softly, "and it's trying to guide us. Or trap us." "Maybe both," she admitted. "But the compass, the silver one from the Peveril vault. Your family used it to find hidden paths during the war." His jaw tightened. "That compass hasn't worked in years." "Not until you touched it," she said. "Remember? It spun once, then pointed north-northwest, toward the highlands." He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in days. "You think the book remembered that?" "I think it remembers things we've forgotten," she whispered, "and it's using us to remember them too." Outside, the wind rose, rattling the high windows. A gust snuffed the candles along the far wall, plunging the room into flickering half-light. The book trembled in her hands. Then, from the page, a faint sound, like distant wind through a narrow cave. A sigh. Luna turned her head, listening. Draco frowned. "What is it?" "It's calling," she said, standing. "The door is shaped like a sigh. We have to go." "Now? In the dark?" "The moor won't wait," she said, gathering her cloak. "And neither will the book." He stared at the page again, at the words written in her hand, words that hadn't been there when he left her last night. Words that spoke of him, of fear, of names. "You really believe this is leading us somewhere real?" he asked, voice low. Luna looked at him, her eyes wide and unblinking in the dim light. "I believe some doors only open when you're ready to walk through them, and some truths only speak when you're afraid to hear them." He didn't answer, but when she moved toward the door, he followed. Snow fell in heavy, silent sheets over the frozen fjords of the north, each flake catching the pale glow of the aurora that shimmered like a breath held in the sky. Luna Lovegood stood at the prow of the enchanted skiff, her breath curling in silver spirals as the boat carved through ice-laden waters. Behind her, Draco Malfoy hunched in the stern, arms crossed, his breath tight with irritation, or perhaps the cold. He had complained the entire journey from London, muttering about inadequate cloaks and the absurdity of tracking a spellbook through barbaric Nordic wastelands. But he was here. And that, Luna decided, was progress. The wards should be closed, she said, not turning. Her voice was soft, but carried over the wind as if it belonged to it. Ravenclaw rode of a bridge, visible only when the northern lights dance over still water. It was meant for those who seek knowledge, not conquest. Draco scoffed. Then you expect me to believe that a bridge made of light will just appear? Luna smiled faintly. You didn't believe in Crumpelhorn and Snorkax either, until you saw the hoofprints in the Albanian marshes. That was circumstantial, he muttered, though his eyes flicked upward, scanning the rippling sky. They followed the spellbook's trail through forgotten archives beneath Bathilda Bagshot's abandoned cottage, then across the whispering moors where ancient ruins surfaced in a frosted midnight. The book, now bound in shifting silver-blue leather that pulsed like a heartbeat, had begun scribing new incantations in a dialect even Draco's ancestors hadn't preserved. It spoke of collaboration, of alliances forged beyond Hogwarts, when the founders still believed magic could be shared, not hoarded, and Durmstrang, for all its dark reputation, had once been a beacon of that dream. Rowena Ravenclaw had journeyed there in secret, trading spells for runes, philosophy for power. But the alliance had fractured, knowledge was buried, and now, centuries later, the book was remembering. The skiff slowed. Luna stepped forward, boots crunching on rime-coated wood. Before them, the water stilled, unnaturally so, its surface glassy and dark. Then, slowly, light from the aurora bent downward, weaving into strands that coiled across the sea. A bridge formed, not of stone or ice, but of luminous energy, arching toward a distant silhouette of spires and iron-bound towers wreathed in mist. Draco exhaled sharply. Well, that's new. Curiosity is a kind of courage, Luna said, stepping onto the bridge. It held firm beneath her, humming faintly beneath her feet. You don't have to believe in magic to be changed by it. You only have to be willing to walk toward it. He hesitated, then followed. His footfalls were careful, measured. I've spent years distancing myself from old allegiances, my family's name, our choices. You're not here as a Malfoy, she interrupted gently. You're here as someone who remembers what was lost. That's different. They walked in silence for a time, the bridge swaying slightly with each step, the stars above pulsing in time with the book now glowing against Luna's chest, hidden beneath her cloak. When they reached the shore, Durmstrang loomed ahead, massive, jagged, half-frozen in time and ice. Its gates, wrought from black iron and carved with serpentine runes, groaned as they approached. A voice echoed from within, not in words, but in sensation. A pressure against the mind, testing intent. Luna closed her eyes. We seek only memory, she whispered. Not power, not revenge. The gates shuddered, then opened. Draco frowned. How did you— They speak to those who listen, she said simply. Most people only hear silence. Inside, the air smelled of old parchment, pine resin, and something deeper, magic that had settled into the stones like moss. Torches flickered with blue flame along the corridors, casting long shadows that seemed to breathe. This way, Luna said. The archives here were sealed after the Great Schism, but Rowena left a key, not for blood, not for name, but for riddle. Draco raised an eyebrow. And you know the riddle? She turned to him, eyes bright in the dim light. I've been waiting for it my whole life. And for the first time since they'd begun this journey, Draco didn't question her. He simply nodded, and followed. The air beneath the ice tasted ancient and sharp like frozen breath held too long. Luna Lovegood stepped onto the glassy floor of the submerged vault, her boots leaving faint misty prints that curled and vanished into the blue-tinged dimness. Above, the frozen lake's surface shimmered with a soft, otherworldly glow, refracting starlight from a sky they could no longer see. Beneath it, the vault was a cathedral of silence and frost, its walls carved with runes that pulsed faintly, as if breathing. Draco Malfoy followed, his breath visible in short clouds, his wand raised. The tip glowed a cautious silver, casting long shadows across the ice sculptures that lined the chamber, frozen figures in robes, their faces half-formed, mouths open in mid-speech. These aren't statues, he murmured. They're memories, trapped. Luna tilted her head, studying one of the figures, a woman with long braided hair, her hands raised in argument. Rowena, she whispered. They were arguing. Not just debating. This was the last council before the rift. A low hum vibrated through the floor, and the runes on the walls brightened. The air thickened, pressing against their ears. Luna knelt, brushing her fingers over a pattern in the ice. A spiral within a triangle, the mark of the Founders' Conclave. "It's not just preserving them," she said. "It's replaying, the spellbook. It's trying to finish the conversation." Draco frowned. "And if it does, with us here?" She looked up, her pale eyes catching the light like moonstones. "Then we become part of it. The magic doesn't distinguish between past and present when the boundary thins." A gust of wind, impossible, underground, swept through the chamber. Ice cracked with a sound like breaking glass, and the figures began to move. Not physically, but their forms shimmered, dissolving into translucent echoes. Voices rose, layered and overlapping, deep, urgent, pleading. "Slytherin's ambition will fracture us," said a voice like wind through reeds, Rowena's. "And your pursuit of knowledge without limits will birth horrors we cannot control," countered another, smoother, kohler, Salazar's. Luna stood slowly, her hand finding Draco's arm. "Don't speak, don't resist. Let it pull you in." He wanted to argue, to demand a plan, but the air was thickening again, and the words of the Founders wrapped around them like chains of sound. The chamber dissolved. They stood in a great hall, not Hogwarts as they knew it, but younger, wilder, stone walls, veined with glowing crystal, torches of floating fire. 4 figures stood in a circle, their hobes heavy with sigils. Rowena Ravenclaw, alive and fierce, her eyes alight with sorrow. Salazar Slytherin, proud, rigid, one hand clenched around a serpent-headed staff. Helga Hufflepuff, gentle but unyielding. Godric Gryffindor, sword at his side, face drawn. "The book was never meant to be closed," Rowena said, her voice clear. "It was meant to evolve." "And in evolving, it forgets its purpose," Salazar snapped. "Magic must be guarded, not given freely to those who do not understand it." "You speak of blood, not wisdom," Helga said softly. "That path leads to fear, and fear leads to power," Salazar replied. "Or have you forgotten what lies beyond these walls?" Luna stepped forward, though she knew they could not see her. "They were afraid," she whispered. "Not of each other, of what would happen if magic fell into the wrong hands, but they couldn't agree on what wrong meant." Draco watched Rowena pull a book from her robes, small, bound in silver-blue leather. The spellbook, it pulsed with light. "I will hide it," she said, "not destroy it, not hoard it, hide it, so that when the world is ready, it will find its way back." Salazar's eyes darkened. "And if it finds its way to fools, to tyrants, then it will fail," Rowena said. "But if it succeeds, it will be because the world has learned." The vision flickered. The hall cracked like ice, and they were back in the vault, the echoes fading, but the spellbook, now in Luna's satchel, was warm, thumping like a heart. Draco exhaled. She didn't trust any of them to keep it, not even herself. Luna nodded. She trusted time, and those who still believe and wonder. He looked at her then, really looked. The quiet certainty in her gaze, the way the frost seemed to avoid her skin, as if even the cold hesitated to touch her. "You're more like her than you know," he said quietly. She smiled, small and distant. Or maybe she was a little like me. Above them, the ice groaned. The runes dimmed. The memories had been heard. The spellbook for now was still, but Luna tightened her grip on the satchel. It was not over. It was only remembering. The air in the chamber thickened like cooled wax, pressing against Draco's skin with a familiar, suffocating weight. Stone walls, carved with spiraling runes that pulsed faintly blue, seemed to breathe around him. Before him, a mirror stood, tall, cracked down the center, its silvered surface roiling like storm clouds over water. Luna stood near the threshold, her fingers clutching the ancient spellbook to her chest, whispering something under her breath. He didn't hear her. He couldn't. Because in the mirror, a boy stepped out. Not a reflection, not a trick of light. The boy wore a Slytherin tie too tightly knotted, and his hair was slicked back with the same careful precision Draco remembered from mornings when his father's eyes lingered too long on his grooming. The face was thinner, sharper. Fear masked as arrogance. It was him, 16 years old, standing in the astronomy tower. "You're not real," Draco said, voice low, steady. "A lie." The boy tilted his head. "Aren't I?" "You were real enough when you pointed your wand at Dumbledore, when you let them into the castle, when you stood silent while they hurt people." Draco's hand twitched toward his wand, but the air resisted, thick with enchantment. The chamber, the memory, wouldn't let him draw it. "You don't understand," he says. "I didn't have a choice." "No?" The younger Draco stepped forward. "You chose fear. You chose the name Malfoy over anything else. You chose to believe power was the only thing that mattered." The walls flickered, the scent of smoke filled the air, old charred wood, the ghost of cursed fire. Draco saw it again, the terrified faces in the great hall, the way Crabbe had laughed before he died, the way his mother had cried in the drawing room quietly, so his father wouldn't hear. "I was trying to survive," Draco whispered. "And what about them?" the boy snapped, gesturing toward the mirror's depths. Faces swam beneath the silver. Students, teachers, muggles, nameless, faceless, all caught in the wake of choices he'd made. Did they get the same chance? A cold knot tightened in Draco's chest. He wanted to turn away, but his body was locked, caught in the spell's grip. The memory wasn't just showing him the past, it was making him live it. The scene shifted. Now he stood in Malfoy Manor's drawing room, the Dark Lord on the throne of shadows, Bellatrix carving words into Hermione Granger's arm. The sound of it, the knife, the sobbing, cut through him like it was happening all over again. "You stayed," the younger Draco said, voice quieter now. "You didn't stop it. You didn't even try." "I was afraid," Draco said, the words breaking. "I was a boy with a wand, a boy with choices." Tears stung his eyes. He hated this, the weakness, the shame, the way his breath came too fast. He'd spent years building walls around that time, sealing it away behind cold glances and polished lies. But here, in this cursed chamber, the spellbook's magic peeled each layer back with surgical precision. Then, light, soft, silvery, like moonlight on water. It spilled across the floor and the memory shuddered. Luna stepped forward, the spellbook open in her hands. Her voice rose, clear and steady, weaving through the air in a language Draco didn't know, but felt in his bones, a chant older than the House of Slytherin. The younger Draco turned to her. "She can't save you. This is your truth." "No," Luna said, not unkindly. "This is only part of it, and even truths need balance." She walked toward Draco, her bare feet silent on the stone. She didn't look at the memory boy, she looked only at him, the man, the one breathing, trembling, still standing. "You didn't know then," she said softly, "that you could choose differently. But you did later. You lied to Voldemort. You refused to identify Harry Potter. You held your family together when everything was falling apart. That matters." Draco swallowed. "It doesn't erase what I did." "No," Luna said, "but it changes what it means." The mirror trembled. The younger Draco's face wavered, anger, confusion, then something softer, a flicker of recognition, and then like mist under morning sun, he dissolved. The chamber exhaled. Draco sank to his knees, the weight lifting but the ache remaining. Luna closed the spellbook and knelt beside him, her presence quiet, like a steady flame in a dark room. "You carry it," she said. "But you don't have to carry it alone." He didn't answer. Not yet. But for the first time in years he didn't feel buried beneath it. The fire crackled low in the hearth of the forgotten study, its amber glow painting trembling shadows across the ancient stone walls. Rain whispered against the narrow window, slicking the glass with silver trails that caught the light like liquid thread. Dust hung in the air, stirred only by the soft rustle of parchment, and the occasional breath that neither of them wanted to acknowledge. The spellbook lay between them on a slab of carved oak, its pages now still. For the moment, its ink shifting only in the faintest currents, like thoughts settling into sleep. Draco sat with one arm braced along the back of the threadbare armchair, his posture rigid despite the hour. His silver blonde hair, longer now and less meticulously groomed, fell across his forehead, half concealing the dark circles under his eyes. He stared into the fire, not at Luna, as he spoke. "I used to believe the name Malfoy meant something," he said, voice low, almost reluctant, not just power, purpose. "That we were necessary, a kind of order in the chaos." He exhaled, short and bitter. "And then the war ended, and the name became a stain, a whisper in hallways, a reason to look away. Luna turned her teacup slowly in her fingers, the chipped porcelain warm against her skin. She didn't offer pity. She rarely did. Instead, she watched him, the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers curled slightly, as if grasping for something solid in the past. "I think names are like constellations," she said at last. "We see patterns in them because we want to believe they mean something. But stars don't care what we call them, they just are." He glanced at her then, a flicker of surprise in his gray eyes. "That's absurd." "Maybe," she said, smiling faintly. "But so is a spellbook that writes itself. So is a basilisk that sings lullabies in the pipes of an abandoned castle. The world is full of things that don't fit names very well." He was quiet for a long moment. The fire snapped, sending a shower of embers spiraling upward. "I spent years trying to live up to what the name demanded," he said. "Then years trying to outrun it. And now, I don't know which version of me is real. The one who believed in purity of blood? The one who stood silent while terrible things happened? Or this?" He gestured vaguely at himself. "This man who studies forgotten runes and takes orders from the ministry like some common clerk." "You're the one who noticed the ink was bleeding backward on page 12, Luna said softly. "While the ministry experts argued about containment protocols, you saw it was trying to speak. That wasn't your father's magic, that was yours." He looked at her sharply. "You don't know what's in my blood." "No," she agreed. "But I know what's in your choices. You could have refused this mission. You could have let the book unravel, but you're here, you're listening. That matters more than blood, Draco." The rain tapped harder against the window. The spellbook shifted, a single rune glowing faintly, then fading. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice quieter now. "Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever be more than what I was. If it's even possible to become someone new when the world remembers you as something else." Luna set her cup down and reached into the satchel beside her. She pulled out a small, smooth stone, iridescent, like mother of pearl, threaded with veins of gold. "This is a memory stone," she said. "Centuries old. It doesn't hold memories. It holds intent. The people who made it believed that who you want to be leaves a mark on the world, even if no one sees it." She placed it gently in his palm. "You don't have to erase your name," she said. "You just have to write a new story beneath it." He stared at the stone, then closed his fingers around it. Warmth spread through his hand, faint but undeniable. For the first time in years, Draco Malfoy felt something uncoil in his chest. Not absolution, not forgiveness, but the quiet possibility of beginning. The air inside the chamber tasted of moonlight and old parchment, cool and sharp on the tongue. Luna Lovegood stepped forward, her boots silent on the floor of polished obsidian that reflected the ceiling. No, not a ceiling, but a dome of swirling silver constellations, each star a tiny twinkling charm suspended in enchanted air. Before them, shelves of liquid mercury rose like vines from the ground, twisting and folding into new configurations with a soft chime, as if the library itself were breathing. Draco Malfoy hesitated at the threshold, one hand braced against the stone archway. "This is impossible," he murmured, though his voice carried too much awe to be truly skeptical. "Rowena's silver library, it's a myth, a footnote in a forgotten grimoire." Luna turned to him, her wide eyes catching the starlight. "Myths are just truths waiting to be found, Draco. Like snidgets in a storm, they're always there, even when you can't see them." He exhaled sharply, stepping inside. The moment his foot touched the obsidian, the shelves shifted. A spiral unfolded into a bridge, arcing over a trench filled with floating books bound in sky-blue leather. One drifted upward, ages fluttering like wings, and settled gently into a cradle of silver tendrils. Luna tilted her head. "It knows we're looking for something." "For Star?" "Her star, who—" Draco corrected, his fingers brushing the spine of a book that pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. "The spellbook isn't just lost, it's choosing when to be found." A low hum filled the air, and the constellations above realigned. Orion's belt dissolved into the shape of an open hand, then morphed into a quill writing invisible ink across the dome. Luna watched, transfixed. It's speaking in riddles, like Rowena used to. She believed knowledge should reveal itself only to those who could listen. Draco frowned. "And how do we listen, Star?" Luna closed her eyes. "By stopping." He looked at her as if she'd grown antlers. We don't have time for meditation, Lovegood. The last enchantment turned the Thames into singing eels. Next could be worse. But that's how it works, she said softly. You can't take star knowledge here. You have to let it come, like catching mist in your palms. She stepped to the center of the chamber, and slowly turned, arms outstretched. The silver shells responded, slowing their dance, aligning into concentric circles around her. Draco watched, pulse quickening, as the floating books began to spin in unison, their pages whispering in a language that sounded like wind through reeds. Then, one by one, they opened. Not with hands, not with magic, he recognized, but with memory. Images spilled from the pages. A woman with dark, knowing eyes, writing by candlelight. A tower crumbling into mist. A book with a sapphire clasp, glowing like a captured star. Draco's breath caught. That's the Ravenclaw grimoire, Luna whispered. It remembers her. And it remembers what she feared. What was that? That knowledge, when hoarded, becomes a prison. When shared, it becomes wings. The shelves shifted again, this time parting like a curtain to reveal a pedestal at the far end of the chamber. Resting atop it was a book bound in silver thread and moonstone, its cover shifting like water, reflecting not the chamber, but a stormy sky over Hogwarts. Draco took a step forward, then paused. It's waiting for someone, Luna smiled. Maybe for both of us. They walked toward it together, the library humming beneath their feet, the stars above, spelling out a single word in ancient runes. Star begin. The air in the Chamber of Whispers thickened like cooling wax, pressing against their skin with a weight that had nothing to do with gravity. Luna stood still, her fingers brushing the spine of the Ravenclaw spellbook, which now pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat beneath ancient leather. Before them, rising from the shattered tiles of the forgotten library floor, coalesced a figure woven from light and dust, tall, robed, and crowned with antlers of frost. Its eyes, two pools of shifting constellations fixed upon them without blinking. You seek knowledge, it intoned, the voice neither young nor old, but layered like echoes from 1,000 library halls long fallen. Yet knowledge demands balance. To pass, you must offer something of equal value. Not gold, not blood, not even memory. Offer what cannot be measured, what magic itself cannot replicate. Draco stepped forward, his wand half-raised, jaw tight. We're sanctioned by the Ministry. This is an artifact recovery mission. There are protocols. The Guardian tilted its head. Protocols are cages. You are not bound by parchment, but by intent. Speak, Seeker. What do you bring? Luna lowered the book gently to a stone plinth, her movements calm, almost reverent. She didn't look at Draco, but he felt the shift in her presence, like the hush before starlight breaks through cloud. Knowledge isn't meant to be hoarded, she said softly. It's meant to be believed in, even when it can't be proven, even when the world says it's foolish. The Guardian's gaze softened, just slightly. She reached into the pocket of her robes and drew out a small, delicate object, a moonstone pendant, cracked down the middle, held together by silver thread. My mother gave this to me when I was 6. She said it let her see nargles. Everyone told me they didn't exist, but she believed, and because she believed, I did too. Even after she was gone, even when no one else saw them. Her fingers trembled, just once. Faith isn't about proof, it's about choosing to see what isn't there, and trusting it's real anyway. She placed the pendant on the plinth beside the book. It glowed faintly, the cracked ceiling for a breath, then fading again. Draco stared at her. He'd spent years sharpening his disbelief, armoring himself against sentiment, against anything that couldn't be leveraged or controlled. And here she was, offering something fragile, unguarded, something he couldn't quantify. The Guardian exhaled, a sound like pages turning in a storm, and dealt. You offer faith, not blind, but worn thin by doubt, and still carried. That is rare, that is worthy. It reached out, not to take the pendant, but to touch Luna's forehead, with a finger of frost and stardust. A ripple passed through the chamber. The walls shimmered, revealing archways that hadn't been there before, doorways lined with glyphs that shifted like living ink. The path opens, the Guardian said. But know this, the spellbook does not merely record magic, it remembers, and it grieves. It seeks not a keeper, but a companion. Beware the hunger of forgotten things. Then it dissolved, not vanishing, but scattering like dandelion seeds on a breeze. each speck carrying a syllable of an old song. Draco lit his wand lower. He looked at Luna, really looked at her. The moonstone pendant still sat on the plinth, quiet now, but somehow brighter. "You really see them, don't you?" he asked, voice low. "The things no one else does." She smiled, small and shad. "And sure, only when I stop trying to prove they're there. You'll see them too someday, when you stop needing to doubt." He didn't answer, but he didn't look away either. Behind them, the spellbook hummed, a single clear note, and the next door began to glow. Rain lashed against the stained glass of the Hall of Whispers, each drop sizzling as it met the ancient wards. Inside, the air hummed, not with sound but with the pressure of something waking. Luna Lovegood stood barefoot on the mosaic floor, her fingers hovering just above the open spellbook. It pulsed like a heartbeat, pages no longer parchment but shifting light, swirling with runes that had not been written by hand but dreamed into being. "It's not just rewriting," Draco murmured from the archway, his voice tight. "It's remembering." She didn't turn. Everything forgotten wants to be found, Draco, even spells. The first fragment had surfaced 3 weeks ago, a scrap of vellum tucked inside a hollowed-out grimoire in the Malfoy vaults. Then another, in the ruins beneath Ilfracombe's, humming with a resonance that bent the stars above it. Each piece, when brought near the others, had fused seamlessly, drawn together by a force older than bloodlines. Now, the final fragment, carved into a silver locket once worn by Rowena herself, had just melted into the spine of the book, and the magic within had ignited. The light from the pages climbed the walls, tracing the forgotten symbols of the hall. Stone figures, long thought to be decorative, began to turn their heads, eyes made of crushed sapphire flickering to life. One raised a hand, not in warning, but in recognition. Luna exhaled. They knew her. They remember her voice. Draco stepped forward, his wand drawn, though he knew her no incantation would hold here. "This isn't containment, it's communion. The book isn't broken anymore, it's whole, and it's trying to speak." A low chime rang through the chamber, and the spellbook lifted from the stand, hovering at eye level. The light from its pages wove into the air, forming constellations that had no place in any known sky. Words formed in the spaces between stars, glimmers of Latin, Old Gaelic, even a tongue Luna had only heard in dreams beneath the veil. "It's writing a new incantation," she whispered. "Not to control magic, to restore balance." Balance. Draco's jaw tightened. By unraveling wards across Europe? By making broomsticks recite poetry and turning ministry owls into swans? "Because magic is tired," she said softly. "It's been locked away, regulated, silenced. This book, it remembers when magic was wild, when it lived in rivers and stone and song." He looked at her, then, really looked, her silver-blue eyes reflecting the spell's glow, her hair lifting as if stirred by an unseen tide. For a moment, the wariness in him stilled, and then the spell surged. The constellations collapsed inward, coalescing into a single blinding glyph that hovered above the book. The floor trembled, the spectral guardians knelt. Luna gasped as a thread of light latched onto her wrist, and another to her temple, pulling, not painfully but insistently. "Rowena," she breathed. "She's not just in the book, she's in the magic." Draco lunged, grabbing her arm. "You can't go in, we don't know what it'll do." "It's not about knowing," Luna said, her voice distant, already slipping. "It's about trusting." The light engulfed her. For a heartbeat, Draco stood alone in the storm of enchantment. Then the glyph pulsed, and reached for him too. He didn't resist. The world dissolved. They stood together on a bridge of starlight, suspended over an ocean of ink. Above them, a sky spun with lost spells, half-form, beautiful, aching. And in the center of it all, a woman in blue robes, her face both ancient and ageless, turned to them. "You are not the first I have called," Rowena Ravenclaw said. "But you may be the first who are ready to listen." Draco found his voice, raw but steady. "What do you want?" "Not want," she corrected. "Remember, magic was never meant to be owned, only shared, only loved." Luna stepped forward. "Then let us help you rewrite it, not to control but to heal." The spell trembled, the ocean below rose in gentle waves, and between them, the first true word of a new magic began to form. The air in the vault tasted of rust and old lightning, sharp on the tongue and humming against the skin. Stone groaned beneath their feet, great seams splitting along the ancient floor like cracks in drying clay. Above, the vaulted ceiling trembled, its enchanted constellations unraveling into streaks of silver that dripped like molten glass. The spellbook, Rowena's book, lay open on the dais at the center, pages flapping as if caught in a storm wind, ink swirling and reforming into symbols no living wizard had ever seen. Luna stood motionless, her eyes wide and unblinking, one hand outstretched toward the book as though listening to a voice only she could hear. Dust rained down from the archways, and the spectral wards, once serene figures of robed scholars, now writhed, their forms flickering between wisdom and hunger, their whispers turning to shrieks. "We have to close it," Draco said. His voice tight, he stepped toward her, hand gripping his wand with white-knuckled force. "Luna now." She didn't move. "It's not finished writing," she murmured. "It's trying to tell us something. It's tearing the world apart to say it." He grabbed her arm, yanking her back as a fissure split the dais where she'd stood. The book shuddered, and a pulse of raw magic erupted outward, throwing them both against the wall. Draco's head cracked against stone, stars bursting behind his eyes. When his vision cleared, the vault was collapsing in earnest. Pillars cracked and tilted, the weight of centuries giving way. The air itself felt thin, brittle, as if reality were peeling back at the edges. He saw the distortion first, a shimmer in the air like heat off pavement. Then the colors began to bleed. Red turned to violet, sound warped into silence, and for one heart-stopping moment, he could no longer feel his own breath. Luna pushed herself up, her hair tangled with dust and glowing motes of falling script. "The wards are failing," she said, calm as ever. "It's not just this place. The enchantments are cascading. Hogsmeade, Diagon, maybe further. If the book isn't contained, the magic will unravel backward. Spells forgotten will return. Spells never meant to exist will take root." Draco gritted his teeth. "Then we seal it. With force if we have to." She shook her head. "You can't fight a memory with violence. Not one this old." "Then what do you suggest?" he snapped, frustration clawing at his chest. "We stand here and let it unmake everything." "No," she said, turning to him. Her eyes, wide and pale as moonstones, held no fear, only certainty. "But someone has to hold the breach. Someone has to be the anchor." Understanding struck him like a curse to the gut. "You can't mean it has to be me," she whispered. "I've been listening. It knows my voice." "No." The word tore from him, raw and sudden. He stepped between her and the dais. "You don't even know what it will cost." "I do," she said softly. "But you're stronger with shields than I am, and I'm the only one who can speak to it." The ceiling split with a sound like thunder. A chunk of carved stonework crashed down, missing them by inches. Draco raised his wand, shouting a barrier charm, but the magic sputtered, unstable, thin. The vault was rejecting spells now, the rules of magic bending under the book's influence. He looked at her, really looked, at the smudge of dirt on her cheek, the quiet strength in her stance, the way she still carried a radish earring, even here, even now. Then he made his choice. With a snarl of effort, Draco slammed his wand into the ground and wove both hands through the air, drawing on bloodline magic. Old Malfoy incantations, forbidden and deep, the kind that asked for pain in exchange for power. Blue light erupted from his palms, spiraling upward in a dome of shimmering force. The collapsing vault slowed. Stones hung mid-air. The falling light froze like rain in glass. Luna gasped. "Draco, don't argue," he bit out, teeth clenched. Sweat beaded on his brow, then turned to steam as the magic burned through him. "Do what you have to, and make it quick." She hesitated only a second before stepping past him, toward the dais, toward the book. As she reached for it, the air screamed, and Draco held the world together, one breath at a time. Dust swirled in the air like powdered starlight as the last of the vault's arches groaned and cracked. Stone shattered overhead, raining shards onto the ancient floor, and the spellbook pulsed violently in Luna Lovegood's hands, its pages flapping as if trying to take flight. The air hummed with unraveling magic, spells from centuries past, snapping like frayed threads, and the very laws of enchantment seemed to tremble. "We're out of time," Draco said, his voice tight. He grabbed her arm, but Luna didn't move. Her eyes were closed, her lips moving silently, fingers tracing a delicate spiral on the cover of the book. "There's a way," she murmured. "An old charm. Rowena never trusted locks. She believed in resonance." He turned sharply. "Resonance? We're about to be buried alive, Lovegood, not composing sonnets." Luna opened her eyes. They were clear, steady, filled with a calm that made Draco's pulse stutter. "Then trust me, just for a moment. Give me your hand." He hesitated. The vault was collapsing. One of the pillars burst into mist, dissolving like sugaring tea. But something in her gaze held him, not with command but with quiet certainty. He took her hand. Her skin was cool, but a current passed between them, sudden and deep. Luna began to chant, a melody older than memory, words in a dialect that hadn't been spoken since the fall of the Peveril line. The spellbook shivered. The air thickened. Then she pressed their joined hands against the book's spine. A light bloomed, not bright, but deep, like moonlight seen from underwater. It spread through the pages, turning ink into silver filaments, binding the chaos. The collapsing stone slowed, suspended in midair, dust hanging like frozen breath. "The charm doesn't save one," Luna whispered. "It saves two. It only works when two magics agree." Draco felt it then. His own magic, cool and precise, entwining with hers, wild and wandering, like ivy meeting steel. Their auras brushed, recognized, wove together in a harmony he didn't know was possible. His breath caught. "For knowledge shared," Luna said, "is never lost." The floor beneath them shimmered. The walls folded inward, not with destruction, but with transformation. The vault wasn't collapsing, it was becoming something else. The spellbook glowed, and in that glow Draco saw fleeting images, a woman with eyes like storm clouds, a tower by the sea, a raven made of smoke and syllables. Then the world turned inside out. They landed in the ruins of an old watchtower. The wind signed through broken arches. Night had fallen, stars pricked the sky like scattered salt, and the spellbook lay quiet in Luna's lap, its pages still, its hunger stilled, for now. Draco exhaled, his hand still clasped in hers. He didn't let go. "That was not in any ministry-approved evacuation protocol," he said, voice rough. Luna smiled faintly. "No, it was better. It was true." He looked at her, really looked. The moonlight caught the edges of her face, the quiet strength in her posture, the way her fingers curled protectively around the book, as if it were a sleeping child. "I didn't think magic like that existed," he admitted. "It does," she said, "but most people stop listening for it." A silence settled between them, not empty, but full, like the space after a spell is cast, before the world catches up. Somewhere in the distance an owl called. Draco turned his hand, lacing his fingers with hers. "Then teach me how to listen." Luna's smile deepened. "I already have." Rain lashed the high windows of the Ministry's Department of Mysteries, streaking the enchanted glass with silver trails that shimmered like ghostly fingers. Luna Lovegood stood motionless in the dim corridor, her fingers curled around the cold iron handle of a filing cabinet, its drawer half open, papers spilling like wounded birds. The air smelled of ozone and old parchment, but beneath it, something sharper. Betrayal. Draco Malfoy stepped in behind her, his cloak damp from the storm outside, his jaw tight. "They knew," he said, voice low, almost reverent in its disbelief. "Before we even reached the Isle of Skye, someone told them." Luna did not turn. Her eyes remained fixed on the charmed quill lying atop the misfiled report. A ministry tracking quill, its nib still faintly glowing violet, the ink still wet with recent use. It had copied their findings, every word, every clue, the locations, the protective wards, the true nature of the spellbook's awakening. "They didn't just leak it," she whispered. "They curated it, edited, removed the warnings, left only the promises of power." Her voice was calm, as it often was when the world cracked open around her. But Draco had learned to listen for the tremors beneath her stillness. He moved to the desk, scanning the forged notations. Someone in archives, someone with clearance, had falsified a retrieval log, making it appear the spellbook had already been secured by Auror Detail. A smokescreen, a lie wrapped in red tape. "Which means," he said, "someone high up wanted us chasing shadows while the real players moved in." He glanced at her. "And they knew exactly what we'd find." Luna finally turned, her wide eyes catching a flicker of a nearby torch. The spectral guardian at Dunvegan didn't attack us, she murmured. It tested us, and when we answered Rowena's riddle correctly, it let us pass. But someone else must have tried. Violently. The wards are weakening. I felt it in the stones, Draco exhaled sharply. So now there are thieves with half the knowledge and none of the restraint, poking at a relic that rewrites magic itself. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration flaring. Brilliant, just brilliant. She stepped past him, gliding toward the door. We can't go back to our offices. Not tonight. They'll be watching. Who? The collectors? Or our own people? Both. He followed her down the spiraling staircase, their footsteps muffled by the ministry's ever-shifting architecture. The air grew colder with each step, and Luna paused once, pressing a hand to the wall. A faint blue glow pulsed beneath her palm. Detection magic, one of her own designs, now tinged with interference. They've planted listening charms, she said. In the lifts, the corridors, even in the tea urns probably. A faint smile touched her lips, but Draco didn't return it. They're scared, he said. Not of the spellbook. Of what happens if we expose them. Power fears truth, Luna replied, especially when it's been built on silence. They emerged into the atrium, its grand fountain dark, the golden statues of witches and wizards shrouded in shadow. The place was nearly empty, late hour, bad weather. But Draco spotted the telltale glint of an Auror's badge near the flue gates. Too still, too watchful. We can't apparate from inside, he muttered. No, Luna agreed. But we can vanish. She reached into her coat and withdrew a small opalescent stone, a deluminator modification. Draco realized, one she'd mentioned in passing. Powered by moonstone and whispered secrets. She pressed it into his hand. Hold on, she said. The world dimmed, not just the lights, the sounds, the edges of things. The very air, folding inward, like a breath held too long. And then they were stepping sideways, not through space, but through the quiet spaces between it. When the light returned, they stood in a narrow alley behind a shuttered apothecary in Nocturne Alley, rain still drizzling from a sky thick with cloud. Draco let out a shaky breath. You've been holding out on me. Luna tucked the stone away. I only use it when trust is heavier than stone. She looked at him, her gaze soft but unyielding. They'll come for the book, and for us. But they don't understand. It's not just a relic. It remembers, and it chooses. He met her eyes, the weight of the last week pressing between them, the ruins beneath the highlands, the way she'd hummed old Gaelic lullabies, to calm the wards, the way he'd caught himself watching her, not with suspicion, but with something dangerously close to wonder. Then we find it first, he said, before they break it, or worse, before it breaks them. She smiled then, small and sure, before it rewrites us. Rain lashed against the cracked glass of the old night bus, its headlights sputtering like dying stars as it careened through the narrow Scottish highlands. Inside, Luna Lovegood pressed a hand to the spellbook bound in owl-feathered leather, feeling the pulse beneath the cover, slow, steady, but growing warmer. It had begun rewriting itself again, an hour ago, ink bleeding across fresh pages in a language that shimmered between Latin and something older, something that tasted of mist and moonlight. Across the aisle, Draco Malfoy clutched his wand like a lifeline, gray eyes scanning the fog outside as if expecting shadows to lunge. They're still behind us, he muttered, voice low. I saw the flash of crimson light near Glencoe, bounty hunters, probably hired by the Pureblood Consortium. Or worse, the Raven's Hollow scholars. They'd dissect this book just to hear Rowena's voice in their dreams. Luna tilted her head, listening, not with her ears, but with the quiet hum between her ribs. Then not alone, she said. Something older is moving with them. A ward wraith, maybe. One of the forgotten sentinels from the old ley lines. Draco exhaled sharply. Of course, because what we needed was a cursed ghost with a grudge against knowledge. She smiled faintly, unbothered. Knowledge isn't the problem. It's how they want to use it. The book doesn't belong to anyone. It chooses when to speak. Outside, the landscape twisted into jagged silhouettes, the earth itself seeming to shift as if remembering ancient spells buried beneath peat and stone. The bus jolted violently, and Stan Shunpike cursed from the front, yanking the wheel as the road ahead dissolved into a spiraling mist. That's not natural, Draco said, rising. No, Luna agreed. It's a memory. The land remembers the old wards. The spellbook is waking them. A crack split the sky, a sound like ice breaking over a frozen lock, and for a breath, the rain stopped. The world went still. Then from the mist, shapes emerged. 3 figures on brooms, cloaked in deep crimson, their faces obscured by masks, carved like raven skulls. One raised a wand, and a bolt of red fire streaked toward the bus. Draco threw a shielding charm just in time. The impact rocked the vehicle sideways, and they careened toward a cliff edge. Stan screamed, ears ground. Then impossibly the bus sprouted golden wings from its sides, and lurched skyward, soaring over the drop just as the ground crumbled behind them. Luna caught Draco's arm as they both stumbled. "It's adapting," she whispered. "The spellbook. It's changing things around us, making paths where there were none." He looked at her, breath uneven. "You knew this would happen. I hoped it wouldn't," she admitted. "But books want to be read. And this one, it wants to go home." Home being where exactly? Hogwarts? Because last I checked, the Ministry has it under 27 layers of enchantment. "Not Hogwarts," she said, gazing out at the storm-racked sky. "The Isle of Skye. There's a ruin there, Caer Arianrhod, older than the founders. Rowena went there when she needed to listen. The book remembers." Draco studied her, the wild silver light of the storm catching in her wide, dreamy eyes. He had spent years believing wonder was weakness. Now, pressed between a sentient spellbook and a woman who spoke to invisible creatures, he wondered if he'd been wrong. Terribly, beautifully wrong. "We'll never make it on this flying scrap heap," he said finally. "No," Luna agreed. "We'll have to fly on our own." She reached into her coat and pulled out 2 slender feathers, one silver, one black, twined together with starlight thread, borrowed from a pair of migrating thestrals. They didn't mind. They said the sky misses us. Draco stared at the feathers. "You're mad." She handed him one. "Only a little, but enough to believe we can do this." He took it. The feather warmed in his palm, unfurling into the shape of a broom. No, something wilder. A living thing of wind and bone. Below them, the hunters were grouped. Above, the storm parted just enough to reveal a sliver of stars. Luna stepped to the edge of the broken floor, broom forming beneath her fingers like breathtaking shape. "Hold on to what matters," she said, "even if you don't know what it is yet." And then they jumped, into sky, into storm, into the unknown. Rain tapped a quiet rhythm against the crooked windows of the old Lovegood house, its sound muffled by the thick, enchanted glass that shimmered faintly under the moonlight. Inside, the air smelled of parchment, dried moonbell blossoms, and something older, magic worn soft by time and memory. Luna sat cross-legged on the floor, the Ravenclaw spellbook open in her lap. Its pages no longer lay still. They trembled like the wings of a caged bird, ink swirling and reforming into symbols that pulsed with a pale blue light. Draco stood near the staircase, one hand braced against the wall, as if the house itself might tilt and spill him out. He watched her. Luna, so still amid the storm of enchantment, her silver hair catching the lamplight like strands of starlight. He had never seen anyone so unafraid of the unknown. In fact, she seemed to welcome it. "It's almost done," she said softly, not looking up. "The book is remembering itself." "The book is breaking reality," Draco corrected, voice low. He glanced at the corner where a clock had begun to run backward, its hands spinning counterclockwise. "Time's unraveling in Hogsmeade. People are seeing their pasts like ghosts in the street." Luna turned a page gently, her fingers brushing the ink as though calming a living thing. "It's not breaking, it's trying to go home." "Home?" "To wonder," she said. "The riddle, knowledge must return to wonder. I thought it meant we had to find some hidden vault, some lost chamber beneath the school. But it's not a place, it's a state, a way of seeing." Draco exhaled sharply. "You speaking in riddles again." She smiled then, faint but real. "You used to hate that." "I still do," he muttered, though there was no real heat in it. Silence settled between them, broken only by the whisper of turning pages, and the distant hoot of an invisible creature in the woods. Draco stepped closer, peering over her shoulder. The spellbook had stopped its frantic shifting. Now a single phrase repeated across the page in looping graceful script. "Star knowledge must return to wonder." "Star. It's not about control," Luna murmured. Rowena didn't want her knowledge locked away, studied like bones in a museum. She wanted it alive, curious, breathing. "And how do we make it breathe?" Draco asked, voice quieter now. Luna closed her eyes. By remembering how to wonder, she placed both hands flat on the book and began to hum a soft wordless tune that Draco didn't recognize, something old and wordless, like wind through reeds. The air in the room changed. The light dimmed, then bloomed again, not from the lamps, but from the walls themselves, where hidden runes, left by Xenophilius or older still, glowed to life in spirals and constellations. Draco stepped back, instinctively reaching for his wand, but the magic wasn't attacking. It was answering. He watched as Luna swayed slightly, still humming, her voice weaving into the hum of the house, the pulse of the book, the breath of the world outside. And then, without warning, he remembered. Not a memory of books or bloodlines, but of being 7 years old, standing in the garden at Malfoy Manor, staring up at a night sky so thick with stars it looked like splattered ink. He had asked his mother, "What are they?" And she had said, "No one knows, Draco. That's what makes them beautiful." He hadn't thought of that in 20 years. A lump rose in his throat. He looked down at the book. The words had changed. The script was simpler now, open, like an invitation. "It's not a spell to master," Luna said, opening her eyes. "It's a question. What do you wonder about?" Draco hesitated. Then slowly he knelt beside her. "I wonder," he began, voice rough, "if magic was ever meant to be owned." The book glowed, not with power but with warmth. The runes on the walls faded. The clock upstairs clicked once and began ticking forward again. Outside the rain slowed. Somewhere a nightbird sang. The air in the restricted section had grown thick with the scent of old parchment, and something sharper, like ozone after a storm. Luna Lovegood stood motionless, her fingers hovering just above the open pages of the ancient spellbook. It pulsed faintly, a rhythm like a heartbeat, and the ink swirled as though stirred by an invisible hand. Before them, suspended in midair, a three-dimensional map of Hogwarts shimmered into existence. Stone corridors, moving staircases, the great hall with its enchanted ceiling, all rendered in delicate lines of silver and blue light. Draco Malfoy stepped closer, his breath catching. "It's not just a map," he murmured. "It's alive." "Yes," Luna said softly. "It remembers the castle better than any of us, better than time." Her voice was calm, but Draco could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her silver blue eyes flickered with both awe and wariness. The spellbook had been rewriting itself for days, spilling forgotten incantations into the world, twisting charms into something wild and unpredictable. And now it had led them here, deep into the bowels of the library, to this moment. A single thread of light branched downward from Ravenclaw Tower, plunging through layers of foundation and bedrock. It terminated in a small, pulsing sigil, a glyph Luna didn't recognize, yet felt in her bones. "There's a chamber," she said, "beneath the tower, older than the school." Draco narrowed his eyes. "No records mention that." "Of course not," Luna replied, turning to him with a faint smile. "The founders didn't write everything down. Some things were only meant to be felt." He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "And you expect me to believe that after centuries, this book decides now to reveal it?" "It's not revealing it to just anyone," she said, her gaze steady. "It revealed it to you, too." He looked away, jaw tight. The truth was, he had felt it. The moment the map formed, a strange pull in his chest, like a memory trying to surface. A whispering parcel tongue. No, older than that. A language of roots and stone. They descended through hidden passages Luna had learned of from the Grey Lady's fragmented tales. Stairs that appeared only when the moonlight struck a particular window at midnight. Corridors that shifted when you spoke in riddles. Draco followed, his wand alight with a cool, steady lumos, his steps careful. He'd spent years avoiding anything that hinted at mystery or magic beyond what was useful. But this was different. It didn't feel like danger. It felt like waking. At last they reached a circular door, carved with interlocking spirals, the stone worn smooth by time. In the center was the same sigil from the map, now glowing faintly. Luna placed her palm against it. Nothing happened. Then Draco, almost without thinking, touched the stone beside her. The sigil flared. The door split open with a sigh, releasing a breath of cool, ancient air that carried the scent of quills, dust, and something like starlight. Inside, the chamber was small but vast in feeling, its ceiling arched into darkness, embedded with tiny crystals that mimicked a night sky. Along the walls stood shelves of glass vials, each containing a swirling mist. Memories, Luna realized. Not just any memories. Echoes of thought, distilled. The wisdom Rowena had never written down. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and upon it, a single empty book. The spellbook in Luna's satchel trembled, then lifted into the air, drifting toward the pedestal like a leaf on water. "It's not finished," Luna whispered. "It never was." Draco watched as the book settled onto the pedestal and began to glow. "So this is where it returns." "No," she said, stepping forward. "This is where it begins again." And as the first new word formed on the blank page, soft, deliberate, written in light, he felt, for the first time in years, that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The air above the astronomy tower shimmered like heat rising from stone, and then the world folded in on itself. Luna stepped through the apparition veil first, her boots meeting the gravel path with a soft crunch. She exhaled slowly, lifting her face to the sky. The castle loomed ahead, its silhouetted turrets piercing a bruised twilight, towers wrapped in mist that clung like old memories. She could smell the damp earth, the faint tang of lake water, and beneath it all, the quiet hum of ancient magic, steady but frayed at the edges. Draco followed a moment later, stumbling slightly, as if the ground had shifted beneath him. He straightened his coat with a sharp tug, jaw tight. "I'd forgotten how much it feels like being watched," he murmured. "It remembers," Luna said simply, turning to face the entrance. "Not just stones and spells, intentions, regrets, love. They all stain the walls here." A pause. Draco studied her profile, the pale hair escaping its braid, the distant light in her eyes, as though she were tuned to a frequency only she could hear. "You always did see things no one else did, and you always pretended not to see the ones you felt." He didn't answer. They walked in silence across the courtyard, their footsteps echoing against flagstones worn smooth by centuries of students. The great oak doors groaned open before they reached them, though no hand touched the handles. Inside, the entrance hall yawned wide and shadowed, torchlight flickering in uneven pulses along the walls. Luna stepped forward, her fingers brushing the banister. A soft chime rang out, faint, like glass struck by wind, and the ripple passed through the air. Portraits stirred in their frames. Phineas Nigellus peered down at them with narrowed eyes, then sniffed and turned away. Dumbledore's portrait, though empty, seemed to lean forward, as if listening. "The castle knows why we're here," Luna whispered. "It knows who we are," Draco corrected, voice low. "Or who we used to be." A chill slipped down the corridor. The torches dimmed. From the shadows near the grand staircase, a figure emerged, not solid, not quite, translucent and glimmering like moonlight on water. Rowena Ravenclaw. She floated several inches above the ground, her robes woven from starlight and silence. Her eyes, large and silver, fixed first on Luna, then on Draco. No words came, but the air filled with the sound of turning pages, of ink, writing itself across parchment. Luna bowed her head. "We mean no disrespect. We've come because the world is unweaving where it shouldn't. Your book." The spectral figure raised a hand. A single feather, impossibly real, drifted from her sleeve and landed in Luna's palm. It shimmered with iridescent blues and violets, humming faintly. "She remembers you," Draco said, surprised. Luna smiled. "She remembers you too. From your mother's bloodline, the Malfoys once held a Ravenclaw grimoire, burned during the purges, wasn't it?" Draco stiffened. "My grandfather said it was lost. Lost things have a way of returning when they're ready," Luna said, tucking the feather into her cloak. "Just like people." The ghost of Rowena tilted her head, then pointed, not toward the library, not toward Ravenclaw Tower, but down, into the depths, toward the Chamber of Secrets. Draco's breath caught. "No, that's impossible. That passage was sealed. Sealed, not silenced," Luna said, already stepping forward, "and the book's magic is waking what sleeps." Rowena's form began to fade, but before she vanished she touched two fingers to her temple, and extended them toward them, one to Luna, one to Draco. A thread of light spun between them, invisible, but felt, a resonance, a connection older than memory. Then she was gone. The torches flared back to life, the castle settled. But the air still vibrated with quiet expectation. Draco looked at Luna. "You felt that," she nodded. "It's not just the book rewriting itself, it's rewriting us." He swallowed. "And if we don't like what it writes, then we write back," she said, and started down the hall, her steps light. "Sure, come on, Draco, the past is waiting." The air in the hidden corridor was thick with the scent of old parchment and damp stone, a silence so deep it seemed to swallow even the echo of their breath. Luna Lovegood stood before the massive stone door, its surface carved with spiraling runes that shimmered faintly, like moonlight on water. The spellbook, bound in silver thread and humming with quiet power, rested against her chest, its pages fluttering now and again as if in anticipation. Draco Malfoy stood a few paces behind, arms crossed, his gray eyes scanning the inscriptions with reluctant admiration. "This is it," Luna said, her voice soft but certain. "The Chamber of Wisdom, Rowena's sanctuary." Draco stepped forward, brushing his fingers over the cold stone. "And how do we open it? Blood? A password? A sacrifice of something sentimental?" Luna tilted her head, studying the carvings. "No, it wants truth. Not the kind you say aloud when someone asks, but the kind that lives beneath your ribs, where you keep the things you're afraid to name." He scoffed, but there was no real bite to it. "Not anymore. Of course it does, because nothing in this cursed journey could be simple." She turned to him, her wide eyes catching the dim, floating light of the Lumos charm she'd conjured. "It has to be both of us. Together. The book chose you for a reason, Draco. Not just your knowledge. It sees what you hide." He stiffened at the sound of his name on her lips. Never Malfoy, always Draco, as though she'd known all along who he might become, even when he didn't. "And what do you think I'm hiding? That you're tired of being the son your father wanted. That you read ancient wards not just to survive, but because you want to understand something true for once. Not power, not legacy. Truth." He looked away, jaw tight. The silence stretched, but it wasn't empty. It was full of things unsaid, years of pride and pain wrapped in silence. Finally, he exhaled. "You're right. I used to believe that blood defined magic, that purity was strength. But after the war, after everything, I saw how hollow it was. I spent years trying to erase my name from history, but I can't, and maybe I shouldn't. Maybe the only way forward is to stop pretending I'm someone I'm not." Luna smiled faintly. "That's a start." The runes on the door pulsed once, softly. But the door remained closed. She took a breath. "It's not enough. It wants mine, too." Draco looked at her, really looked. "You've been the most honest person I've ever met. What could you possibly be hiding?" Her fingers curled around the spellbook. "I pretend I don't need anyone, that I'm fine alone, that the whispers, the visions, the loneliness, it's all part of being different. But it's not. I miss people. I miss connection. I miss being seen, not as Luna Lovegood, but as someone who aches and loves and fears just like anyone else." Her voice wavered just slightly. "And I didn't expect you to understand, but you do. Even when you're sharp, even when you pretend not to care, you see me, and that terrifies me because I don't want to hope. But I do." The stone beneath their feet trembled. A low hum rose from the door, growing louder, as the runes flared with silver light. Cracks of brilliance split the surface, and slowly, with a groan of ancient hinges, the door began to open. Draco reached for her hand without thinking. "Luna." She squeezed his fingers. "We're not done yet." Beyond the threshold, the Chamber of Wisdom unfolded. A vast, starlit dome filled with floating books, shimmering constellations, mapped into the ceiling. And a single pedestal at the center, waiting. The spellbook in her arms glowed brighter, pulsing in time with their heartbeats. And for the first time, neither of them felt lost. The air inside the Chamber of Whispering Tomes was thick with the scent of old parchment and ozone, a low hum resonating from the walls like the breath of a sleeping dragon. Luna stood at the center of the dais, bare feet pale against the silver-veined stone, the Ravenclaw spellbook open before her, its pages now alive with shifting ink that spiraled and reformed like constellations in motion. Draco stood opposite her, his fingers tense against the hilt of his wand, his breath shallow. He had argued against this, pleaded, even. But Luna had only looked at him with those wide, moon-pale eyes and said, "It knows we're coming, and it's waiting for both of us." "The incantation must be spoken as one," she said now, her voice soft but steady, not in unison, not separately, as a single thought. Draco exhaled sharply. "That's impossible. Magic doesn't work like that." "It does," she said, "when it was made for two hearts that see the same truth." He wanted to scoff, to retreat behind the familiar walls of sarcasm and doubt, but something in the way the light bent around her, refracting in faint rainbows through the motes of dust, stopped him. The chamber pulsed, and the book flared, its pages fanning open to reveal a sigil that pulsed like a heartbeat, two spirals entwined, one silver, one deep blue, converging into a single eye. "This was never about knowledge," Luna murmured. Rowena didn't want to be remembered. She wanted to be star understood star. She was lonely, Draco. Brilliant, yes, but alone. And loneliness breaks even the strongest magic. He looked at her then, truly looked, past the radish earrings, past the dreamy expression, to the quiet sorrow beneath. He had spent years building his own walls, layering pride over fear, blood purity over uncertainty, and here she was, dismantling it all with a glance. "What if we get it wrong?" he asked, the words raw. "Then the binding fails, the enchantments unravel, and somewhere a child forgets how to cast Star Luma's star for the first time." He swallowed. No pressure. A faint smile touched her lips. "I trust you." That simple line struck him harder than any curse. No one had said that in years, not sincerely, not since before the war. They stepped closer, their shadows merging on the stone. Luna extended her hand, not for him to hold, but palm up, waiting. After a breath, he mirrored her. Her fingers didn't touch, but the space between them shimmered. The incantation was written in a dialect older than Parseltum, a language of intent rather than sound. They began, Luna's voice like wind through reeds, Draco's low and measured. At first, the words clashed, the magic sputtering like a dying candle. The book trembled. Cracks webbed across the floor. "Slower," Luna whispered. "Say it not with your voice. Say it with your memory." He closed his eyes, thought of the first time he truly felt fear, the night the Dark Lord came to his home. Then, unexpectedly, thought of Luna in the room of requirement, fighting alongside them, her wand steady, her gaze unbroken. And she thought of the empty seat at breakfast after her mother's accident, the silence that no spell could fill. Then, of Draco on the train last month, handing her a book with a muttered, "You left this," eyes averted but hand lingering. Their voices found each other. The words flowed, not as two, but as one breath, one pulse. The sigil blazed, the chamber sang, light erupted from the book, not blinding, but warm like dawn spilling over hills. It wrapped around them a cocoon of shimmering threads that wove through their outstretched hands, through their thoughts, their fears, their quiet hopes. Draco felt it, her belief in impossible things, her kindness like a compass in the dark. And she felt his guarded loyalty, the weight of regret, the desire to be better, buried deep. The magic wasn't controlling them. It was star connecting star them. And in that moment the spellbook closed with a soft star thud star, its pages still. The hum faded. The light dimmed. They stood there, hands still raised, breathing in sync. "It worked," he said, dazed. Luna smiled, tears glistening. "We were the spell all along." The air in the chamber of whispers shimmered like heat over stone, but it was not heat. It was memory, raw and unspooled, curling in delicate spirals from the ancient book cradled between Luna Lovegood's hands. The pages, once blank and brittle, now pulsed with a soft silver glow, as though lit from within by moonlight on water. Around them, the walls of the forgotten library, carved deep beneath the moors, older than the records of even the most diligent archivists, breathed with quiet resonance, stone shifting like the rise and fall of a sleeping chest. Draco Malfoy stepped forward, his boots silent on the moss-kissed tiles. He had never believed in benevolent spirits. The Malfoy name had always spoken of power, control, lineage, not light that danced in the shape of wings or voices that hummed like wind through willow branches. Yet here, before him, the air parted, and from the heart of the spellbook emerged a figure, not solid, not ghost, but something older than both. Rowena Ravenclaw stood before them, translucent as frost on glass, her eyes deep with centuries and stars. She did not speak at first, she simply looked at them. Luna, with her quiet certainty, her fingers still resting gently on the text. Draco, tense, wary, but not retreating. "You have returned what was lost," she said at last, her voice layered like echoes in a hollow tower. "Not just the book, but balance." Luna smiled, small and knowing. It wasn't lost, just waiting. A ripple passed through the chamber. The book trembled, then stilled. The wild magic that had seeped from its pages, the storms in teacups, the doors that opened into yesterday, had ceased. The world beyond this place would no longer forget how to rhyme, nor would broomsticks suddenly recite poetry at midnight. The unraveling had been mended. Rowena's gaze lingered on Draco. "You came not for glory, nor for bloodline. You came because you learned to listen." He stiffened but did not look away. "I came because I was asked, and because I realized some things cannot be controlled, only understood." "Ah," she said, a sound like wind through parchment. "That is the first true wisdom." Then she raised her hands, and from her fingertips bloomed a light, not gold, not white, but a shifting hue, like opal catching dawn. It spiraled outward, wrapping gently around Luna and Draco, not burning, not binding, but weaving. Luna exhaled, her eyes closing, as the light traced the line of her collarbone, the edge of her palm. Draco felt it not as warmth, but as clarity, as if a fog he hadn't known he carried had lifted from his mind. "This is not a gift of power," Rowena said. "It is a recognition. You have faced the shadows of knowledge, the hunger for mastery, the fear of the unknown, and you have chosen another path, together." The light settled between them, not merging, but harmonizing, like two melodies, finding the same key. "It is the light of shared understanding," she whispered. "Rare, precious. It does not demand. It simply is." And then, as softly as mist dissolving, she was gone. The spellbook snapped shut with a sound like a sigh, its glow dimming to a gentle ember beneath Luna's fingers. The chamber quieted. The stones no longer breathed. Draco looked at Luna. She turned to him, her eyes wide and silver in the fading radiance. "She didn't give us answers," he said. "No," Luna replied, stepping closer. "She gave us questions worth keeping." He almost smiled. Almost. But what he felt wasn't amusement. It was something quieter, deeper. A kind of belonging that didn't need to be earned. Outside, the first birds sang over the moors. Dawn was coming. And somewhere, miles away, a child laughed as their toy dragon sprouted real wings and fluttered to the windowsill. The magic had not ended. It had simply learned to listen too. The Ministry of Magic's central archive had always hummed with quiet order, its towering shelves arranged with surgical precision, charms by incantation, transfiguration by era, dark magic behind silver-woven wards. But when Luna Lovegood stepped through the arched entrance on a Tuesday morning thick with the scent of old parchment and ink, she paused, her silver eyes narrowing slightly. The air felt different, charged. Not with danger, not exactly, but with something far more disorienting. Curiosity. Books had moved, not fallen, not scattered. Moved, with purpose. She drifted down the central aisle, her fingers trailing the spines. A treatise on the subtleties of levitation now sat nestled beside the lament of a lonely teapot. Sentient objects, and their sorrows. Two books that had never shared a shelf, let alone a sentence. Further on, the alchemical codex of Cadmus the Grey rested companionably against a worn copy of My Mother's Socks, knitting charms for the modern witch. Luna tilted her head. "How kind of them," she murmured. Behind her, Draco Malfoy stepped through the arch, his cloak snapping at his heels like an impatient cat. "This had better not be another one of your intuitive shelving theories. Lovegood, I've got a goblin tribunal waiting." He stopped. His pale eyes flicked left, then right, his jaw tightened. "Why are all the books pairing up?" Luna turned, smiling faintly. They found their companions. "Look, Grindelwald's manifesto is pressed against a diary titled, 'I Once Loved a Muggle from Dorset.' And over there, the theory of magical inheritance is sharing a shelf with How to Tell Your Father You're a Squib." Draco stood very still. "This is impossible." "Not impossible," she said, stepping lightly toward a section on curse-breaking. "Just rewritten. The spellbook is remembering things. Not just spells, relationships, echoes. It's teaching the world to connect differently." He exhaled sharply. "It's breaking logic, or expanding it." She pulled down a volume, A History of the Veil, and it slid easily into her hand, as if it had been waiting. Its neighbor was a slim, unmarked black book that hadn't been there yesterday. Luna opened it. The pages were filling with ink, slow as breath. Words formed, star, and the veil was never a wall, but a loom, and every thread a choice unmade. Star. Draco stared. That book was blank 3 hours ago. "Yes," Luna said, turning the page. The ink followed, spooling out like smoke. "It's writing itself now, like the others. Not just in this library. I've heard reports from Alexandria, from the hidden stacks beneath Prague, even the whispering shelves in the Shetlands. Everywhere, books are finding partners, not by subject but by resonance." He took a step back. "This is chaos." "No, it's conversation." A hush fell between them as a nearby shelf creaked softly, and 2 heavy tomes slid toward each other, with a sound like a sigh. One was a treatise on celestial magic, the other a collection of lullabies sung by imprisoned witches during the Scottish purges. They touched spine to spine, and for a moment the air shimmered with a low harmonic tone. Draco rubbed his temple. "We're running out of time. If the spellbook keeps rewriting connections like this, what's next? Wands choosing their owners based on childhood fears? Portkeys leading to memories instead of places?" Luna closed the book gently. "Perhaps, but maybe that's not the worst thing. What if the old way, the sorting, the separating, the ranking, was the real unraveling? What if magic was never meant to be controlled, only understood?" He looked at her, then, truly looked, her wild hair catching the dim light, her eyes seeing something far beyond the archive's walls. For the first time since they'd been paired on this mission, he didn't see an oddity. He saw someone who had been listening all alone. The Patronus burst through the wall, a sleek silver otter, Minister Finch's mark. It spoke in a clipped, urgent tone. "All retrieval teams report to the atrium. The Hogwarts library has begun rearranging itself. Rowena's study is awake." Luna tucked the black book into her satchel. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. Draco adjusted his cuffs, voice low. "So it's not just here." "No," she said, her voice soft but sure. "The magic is remembering its heart, and it's beginning with the places we thought we knew." The morning light filtered through the high-arched windows of the Ministry's Hall of Records, painting golden stripes across the worn stone floor. Luna Lovegood stood barefoot on the cold tiles, her fingers trailing over a shelf of levitating scrolls, each inscribed with runes that shimmered like water. A soft hum vibrated in her chest. She could feel the magic in the air shifting, subtly, like the first breath before a song. It had been 3 weeks since the spellbook had sealed itself shut in her study at Rowena's spire, and yet the world still trembled with after-effects. Rainbows now bloomed in puddles after storms. Owls delivered letters in verse. And yesterday, a teacup in the ministry breakroom had recited a sonnet before dissolving into petals. She closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of old parchment and damp ink. "It's not over," she murmured to no one. "It's just learning how to rest." Behind her, the oak doors creaked open, and the measured click of polished shoes echoed down the hall. Draco Malfoy stepped into view, pale as ever, but with a new softness in the set of his jaw. He carried a letter sealed with violet wax, the insignia of the Magical Heritage Council. Luna turned, smiling faintly. "They offered you back," she said. "Not a question." He held out the letter. "They want to pretend the past didn't happen, that I didn't walk away, that my family's name isn't still stained with choices I didn't make, but can't fully disown." Luna took the letter but didn't open it. Instead, she tilted her head, studying him. "Do you want it? The title, the influence, the dinners where everyone speaks in riddles too afraid to mean what they say." Draco exhaled, slow. "I don't know. It's stability. A return to order. After everything, after chasing whispers through forgotten libraries and arguing with mirrors that remember Helga Hufflepuff's favorite pie, I thought I'd want that. Ordinary power. Predictable rules. But," she prompted, her voice like wind through reeds. "But it feels like putting on a coat that no longer fits. Too tight at the shoulders, too heady in the sleeves." He looked at her. "You've ruined me for normal Lovegood." She laughed, light and sudden, the sound making a nearby portrait of a stern-faced archivist blink in surprise. "That's not ruin. That's awakening." Before he could respond, a flock of silver doves burst into the hall, not real birds, but Patronus messengers. One peeled away, circling Luna before dissolving into words spoken in Kingsley Shacklebolt's calm baritone. "Luna Lovegood, in recognition of your work with the Ravenclaw Codex, and your pioneering insights into magical resonance, the Wizengomo formally invites you to establish and lead the Institute for Empathic Magic at the Isle of Dreer. Funding, archives, and international collaboration are yours to command." Silence followed. Draco raised an eyebrow. "Empathic magic." Luna's eyes shone with a quiet fire. "Magic that listens, that feels, not just commands and incantations, but understanding, the way a song knows when to rise, or a tree knows when to shed its leaves." "And you'll go?" he asked, voice lower now. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I think I have to. The spellbook didn't just rewrite itself, it wanted to be heard, and if magic has a voice, someone should learn how to listen." Draco stepped closer. "And if I told you I'd rather debate spectral riddles with you than sit through another council vote on antique goblets? Then I'd say," she whispered, "that the most powerful spells are the ones we don't cast alone." Outside, the sky trembled. A ripple passed through the air, gentle, like the breath of something vast and dreaming. Somewhere, deep beneath the earth, a rune flickered to life, and far away, on a wind-swept island shrouded in mist, a tower of black stone began to rise from the sea, stone by stone, as if summoned by a memory not yet forgotten. The fire crackled low in the hearth, casting amber light across the slanted walls of the Lovegood home, its glow dancing over shelves that bent beneath the weight of spellbooks, odd artifacts, and preserved flutter by bushes that shimmered, even in sleep. Outside, the wind curled around the crooked eaves, like an old friend seeking shelter, and the stars, so much brighter here, so much closer, pierced the velvet sky with quiet insistence. Luna sat cross-legged on the rug, her back against the worn sofa, a book open in her lap. Not the Ravenclaw Codex, no, that rested on the high shelf above the hearth, wrapped in silver thread and humming softly to itself, but a smaller, leather-bound volume she'd found tucked behind a portrait of her great-aunt, a witch who once claimed to have tamed a storm cloud and kept it as a pet. She traced a finger beneath the text, murmuring words that shimmered into the air like silver dust before dissolving. Across from her, Draco reclined in Xenophilius Lovegood's old armchair, one leg draped over the arm, a glass of spiced mead warming in his hand. He wasn't reading. He was watching the way the candlelight caught the edges of Luna's hair, the faint smile that played at her lips whenever a sentence surprised her. "You're not actually absorbing any of that, are you?" Luna asked without looking up, her voice soft with amusement. "I am absorbing the atmosphere," he said, swirling the liquid in his glass. "It's intolerably whimsical." She laughed, a sound like wind chimes tangled in moonlight, and finally lifted her gaze. "That's the point, Draco. Whimsy keeps the world from collapsing under its own weight." He raised an eyebrow. "I've survived this long without whimsy, and yet here you are," she said, closing her book with a gentle snap. "In a house that defies geometry, drinking mead made from fermented dittany and starlight, sitting across from a woman who once charmed her tears into hummingbirds. You've clearly been corrupted." He smirked, though there was no real venom in it, hadn't been for days now. "I blame the spellbook. It's warping my judgment." "The spellbook only reveals what's already there," she said, setting the book aside and tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "It responds to longing, to curiosity, to connection." He looked away, feigning interest in the flutterby bush perched on the windowsill, its petals pulsing faintly blue. "You always say things like that, as if meaning hides behind every word. Because it does," she said simply. "You just have to listen for the spaces between." A silence settled, not uncomfortable, but rich, like the pause before a spell takes root. The fire popped, sending up a shower of golden sparks that spiraled toward the ceiling like tiny phoenixes. Draco set his glass down and reached for the book beside his chair, the one Luna had given him earlier, a treatise on forgotten wards from the Age of Mists. He hadn't wanted to read it, but now his fingers traced the embossed sigil on the cover, and he opened it slowly, as if afraid the words might escape. "You're doing it again," Luna murmured. "Doing what?" "Trying to pretend you don't care." He glanced up. "I care about stopping the spellbook from unraveling reality. That's all." She tilted her head, studying him as if he were a particularly puzzling constellation. "And yet you stayed. You didn't return to Malfoy Manor when you could have. You're here reading under candlelight, drinking my father's questionable mead, and arguing about whimsy like it matters." He exhaled, long and slow. "Maybe it does." She smiled then, small and knowing, and leaned forward to stoke the fire. "Good, because tomorrow we follow the riddle in the third chamber. The one about the mirror that speaks in riddles, and the door that only opens when you forget your name." He groaned. "Of course it does. And you'll need all the whimsy you can get." He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time didn't fight the warmth that settled in his chest. "Then I suppose I'm in trouble." Rain tapped against the glass dome of the hidden archive beneath the North Tower, a soft, persistent rhythm like the whisper of forgotten incantations. Luna Lovegood stood barefoot on the cold stone, her fingers tracing the edge of the ancient spellbook, now glowing with a faint, pulsing silver light. The air hummed, not with magic, as most knew it, but with something deeper, older, the kind that lived in the spaces between breaths and heartbeats. Draco Malfoy leaned against a crumbling bookshelf, arms crossed, his white blonde hair catching the dim candlelight. He had come to retrieve the book, not to linger. But the book had other plans. "It's writing again," Luna said, her voice quiet, as if speaking too loudly might scare the words away. He stepped closer, his polished boots clicking softly against the stone. The ink shimmered on the page, forming in delicate looping script, as though an invisible quill danced across the parchment. When the last stroke settled, the two of them read it together. "Star, the greatest spell is the courage to see another clearly." Star Draco exhaled sharply. "That's not a spell. That's poetry." Luna tilted her head, studying him. "Isn't poetry just magic that hasn't found its wand yet?" He frowned, but didn't answer. His reflection wavered in the glass above the lectern, pale, guarded, the face of a man who had spent years learning which parts of himself to hide. He looked away. The book pulsed once, and the room shifted. The walls shimmered, books dissolving into mist, the floor softening beneath their feet like moss-covered earth. They were no longer in the archive. Wind whispered through ancient oaks, and the scent of damp bark and wild thyme filled the air. Before them stood a door, tall, silver-veined, carved with runes that shifted when not looked at directly. Luna smiled. "It's showing us something." "It's showing us a trap," Draco muttered. But he followed as she stepped forward. The door opened without resistance, revealing not a room, but a memory. They stood in a corridor of Hogwarts, older, quieter. Moonlight streamed through tall windows. Two figures stood at the far end. A young Rowena Ravenclaw, her dark hair threaded with silver, even then, and a man Luna didn't recognize, tall with sharp features and a ring on his finger. Draco knew too well. "That's my ancestor," Draco whispered, stunned. "Arcturus Malfoy." The memory unfolded like a dream. Rowena and Arcturus stood close, not as enemies, but as something else, something tender and fragile. He handed her a single page folded tightly. She took it, her fingers brushing his. "Star, you see me, Star," she said. "Star, not the founder, not the legend, just me. Star, Star." "And you, Star," he replied. "Star, see me. Not the name, not the bloodline, just the man. Star." The memory faded. Draco stood, frozen, breath unsteady. Luna watched him, not with pity, but with something rarer, understanding. "I didn't know," he said, voice low. "They never spoke of this. In the family, he was a purist, a traditionalist." "People are more than their legacies," Luna said gently, "even the ones who write them." He turned to her then, really looked at her, her wild hair, her wide, unflinching eyes, the way she stood barefoot in a forest conjured from a book, unafraid of what it might mean. He had spent years building walls, believing that strength meant never being seen, never being known. But here, now, something cracked. "You've always seen me, haven't you?" he asked. "Even when I didn't want to be seen." She nodded. "Even when you wore your father's shadow like armor." The book glowed brighter, the words on the page deepening, as if satisfied. The wind stilled, the forest thinned, the spellbook snapped shut with a soft final click, and for the first time in years, Draco Malfoy didn't feel the need to run. The air in the Chamber of Secrets was thick with the scent of damp stone and old magic, a quiet hum resonating through the bones of the ancient chamber like a lullaby half-remembered. The spellbook lay open between them, its pages no longer shifting, no longer rewriting themselves in silver ink that danced like starlight. It was still now, complete. Luna knelt beside it, her fingers hovering just above the final page, as if afraid that even breath might disturb the fragile piece it had found. Across from her, Draco sat with his back against the carved serpent's tail, his face pale but calm, the lines of tension that had lived there for weeks finally eased. "It's done," he said, voice low, almost reverent. Luna nodded, her silver eyes reflecting the soft glow that still pussed faintly from the book's spine. It remembered what it was meant to be. Not a weapon, not a curse, a promise. Draco exhaled, long and slow. A promise written in moonlight and riddles. She smiled, just slightly. And in silence sometimes, in the spaces between words. They had chased the spellbook across forgotten corners of the world, through the whispering stacks of the Alexandria vault, beneath the stone arches of a ruined temple of the Carpathians, through time-warped corridors, in the Ministry's deepest archives. They had fought spectral ravens that spoke in riddles, crossed bridges made of memory, and deciphered runes that shifted with intent. But the hardest part hadn't been the magic. It had been learning to trust each other. Draco had come to this journey with skepticism, sharp as a blade, convinced that Luna's intuition was mere whimsy, that her quiet ways were weakness. But she had seen what he could not, patterns in the chaos, the heartbeat of magic beneath the spellwork, and she had never flinched when he faltered, when his family's past rose like a shadow between them. She simply looked at him, as if she saw not the name he carried, but the man beneath it. And Luna, who had always walked just slightly out of step with the world, had found to her quiet surprise that someone could follow her rhythm. Draco listened, not just to her words, but to the silence beneath them. He asked questions not to challenge, but to understand. And when the book had begun to unravel reality itself, threatening to dissolve time into fragments of forgotten spells, it was his hand that had reached for hers, not out of fear, but faith. Now the book lay closed between them, its final enchantments sealed. The magic that had bled into the world, the floating forests above Hogsmeade, the rivers that sang in Parseltum, the stars that blinked in reverse, was fading, gently, like a dream remembered upon waking. The world was stitching itself back together, not as it had been, but as it was meant to be. Luna closed her eyes. Rowena didn't want to be remembered through power. She wanted to be remembered through understanding. Draco reached out, not for the book, but for her hand. "Then let's make sure she is." She turned her palm to meet his, their fingers lacing together, warm, steady. No grand spell had bound them. No incantation had foretold this. Only time, trust, and the quiet magic of two souls who had learned to speak the same unspoken language. Above them, far beyond the chamber, the first light of dawn touched the surface of the lake, sending ripples of gold through the dark water. And somewhere in the halls of Hogwarts, a portrait of Rowena Ravenclaw smiled, just once, before returning to sleep.